Okay, calling this informational briefing to order. This is in regards to the HTA contract for the U.S. Brand Management and Global Services. The Senate Ways and Means Committee will convene to discuss council the following: CNHA and HVCB's roles and in the first and second RFP process. HTA to provide the timeline of requests for proposals issuance to awarding the contract for the U.S. Brand Management and Global Services contract, and for HTA to explain its role in handling of the protests from the HVCB. We'll also hear from HTA board representatives to explain its role in the RFP issuance to awarding the contract. We'll hear from DBED to provide the timeline and the legal and procurement basis for DBED's handling of the protests from HVCB on the contract award, and to explain the legal and procurement basis for the 6-month extension of HVCB's current contract. We'll hear from the Department of Attorney General to explain the legal basis for DBED's process to settle the protests. And we'll hear from the State Procurement Office to explain the procurement process for handling a protest. So good morning.
Hello, good morning.
So if we can hear from a representative from CNHA and HVCB.
Can I ask for a brief reason briefly on something before you start?
We're in the middle of we just started. You know what, you can explain it when we get to DBED.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And then if anybody from HVCB. Okay, so if both of you could explain, just state your name, your organization, and explain your role in the first and second RFP process.
Aloha, Senators. Kuhio Lewis, CEO for the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement.
Good morning.
Mahalo for the opportunity to be here to share in this informational briefing. As you are aware, CNHA is a member-based 501c3. We have roughly 800 members that are part of our network, and we work for the collective advancement primarily of Native Hawaiians, but also to uplift Hawaii as a whole. In terms of the RFP, CNHA applied for this RFP because our culture, our people, and our aina have long been the backbone of the industry, the tourism industry. And with the pandemic and with HTA's strategic direction shifting, we felt it was appropriate for us to step forward, step to the plate, and look at a model of tourism that was less extractive and more regenerative. That's why we put the team together. So it wasn't just CNHA, it was a consortium of organizations that came together, all Hawaii based, to look at how we could respond to the RFP. And of course, it was a long shot for us. We didn't think we would have, we put our best effort forward. Lots of relay, lots of good energy.
I know we're limited by time, so instead of telling us all that background, can you just get into how you're involved specifically? Why you did, but what was your involvement?
In the whole process.
The process was we put together a team to apply for the RFP. And in terms of, so I was the head of the application as the head of CNHA. But yeah, we put together a consortium of organizations to make up the application, which.
So the chronology is you applied when?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so we applied. So initially we applied in late November, early December, I believe it was, for the first RFP. That was when we first applied.
21.
What was the specific dates? Does anybody know from my team?
October 5th, 2021 would have been the initial release.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we initially applied at that point. We went through 2 rounds of evaluation. It was our understanding that HTA advanced the top three. I'm speaking specifically to the first RFP. They advanced three applicants. CNHA was one of the three. And then in the third round, in the final round was a verbal presentation in which CNHA presented, and then we were notified a week or so after that that we were not getting the RFP. That we had fell just short of that. And so if you want chronologically, we asked for the process which allows for us to explore why, and met with HTA's procurement officer, and we found that we were short just under 1 point. And so we asked for supplemental documentation as to where our shortfalls were. And what we discovered was that there was an outlier score which evaluated us significantly lower. And so of the 7 committee members, 5 of them actually selected CNHA, and just 1 of them had scored us lower. The committee member kind of put us in the neutral place.
So HTA shared with you the scoring sheets.
Correct. Yeah. So we filed a protest to the DBED as allowed in the process. And we were informed that they were reissuing the RFP for a second time. The second time, CNHA again put forward an application. This time, and the second time, we actually took the third place applicant and added it to our proposal. So we now had the second and third place from the first proposal a part of our proposal. And we were informed just before June that we were awarded. And on June 5th, I believe we were and a notice was made that CNHA was being awarded. HVCB afterwards, as allowed by law, filed a protest to that, and we have been trying to address that protest since.
Okay.
Good morning.
As far as HVCB goes, in terms of the chronological
You
order,
can just state your name.
our role.
You can state your name.
I'm sorry.
If you can state your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm John Monahan, President and CEO of Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. On October 5th, 2021, as stated, HTA issued an RFP for the United States major market area. Our role at that point became an offerer because on October 7th, 2021, HVCB submitted its intent to apply in response to the first RFP. On November 11th, 2021, we timely submitted our proposal in response to that RFP. We were subsequently notified that our proposal was selected to advance to round 2 of the evaluation process, which we participated. On December 10th, 2021, HVCB received notice that HTA had awarded the contract for the RFP. On December 17th, CNHA submitted its bid protest. And on December 30th, 2021, HVCB received notice that the award to HVCB from the first RFP was rescinded, and that HTA would be resoliciting RFP 2201. On April 15th, 2022, HTA reissued RFP 2201. And the second RFP began. Again, HVCB was an offerer. On April 19th, 2022, HVCB timely submitted its intent to apply. And then on May 17th, 2022, we submitted our proposal in response to the RFP. Our proposal was selected to advance to round 2 of the evaluation process. We participated in such. On June 2nd, 2022, HVCB received notice from HTA that HVCB was not selected to receive the award of the resolicited RFP. On June 21st, 2022, HVCB submitted its bid protest to the second RFP award. And from that point through the process, HTA, HVCB, and CNHA have worked collaboratively in an effort to find a pathway forward. to resolve the bid protest and the awarding of the second RFP in the best interest of the state. And that's essentially the chronology. That's where we sit as of today.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions, but I just want to I have a quick question. Did HVCB also do a debriefing with HTA?
Yes, we did. We had a debrief after the award. I don't have the exact date of that, but yes, we debriefed and then subsequently filed the protest after the debrief.
Okay, what about the first?
We did not have a debrief of what, remember the award was canceled and the RFP was rescinded. So there was no debrief.
Okay, were any of the proposals or the scores shared with you at that point after any of the awarding?
Yes, we requested a debrief and received pieces of some of the information that we asked about, and the scores were part of that. Yes.
Okay, what about any other proposals? Were they shared with you?
Eventually the proposals were given to us. Yes.
Were any of them redacted?
I don't believe there was any redaction in what happened, I believe, and Director McCartney would probably have more information on that. I believe he shared, well, all the proposers, he shared all the documents, and I don't believe anything was redacted. So I think there was 3 bidders, all 3 got to see the RFPs, nothing redacted.
Okay.
That's what I believe. He would be able to confirm that.
Okay. And with CNHA, when you had your debriefing, you mentioned you were shared the scoring sheets. What about the other proposals?
We were given those as well.
Okay, any redaction?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay, questions, members?
Yeah, so the RFP 2, which is kind of confusing, so I'll call it RFP 2, the second proposal that came after the contract was rescinded and a new RFP came out. That RFP was different from, and you both sent in proposals to that.
Mm.
And that big protest followed the same routine that the first one did.
Yes.
So you had the opportunity to look at each other's proposals at that time as well.
Yes.
Yes.
So in the second RFP, what was different from what was different in that RFP and from the first one?
6 months later, time, has changed proposals, et cetera. In terms of the actual written RFP that we're responding to,
Yes.
there were a number of changes. I think, again, someone from HTA who rewrote it might be better to answer that question. But as I remembered, there was more clarification in the destination management side of the contract.
Was there anything majorly different, significantly different, other than clarification?
There was clarifications, but it followed pretty much the same format. But there were changes, yes. Again, I can't remember exactly what they were, but I think most of them dealt with the contract was really in 2 pieces: the brand management, essentially the marketing, and the destination management.
The RFP or the
The
RFP.
RFP, yes. And
This is
I
the second
remember,
RFP.
and Kahio could probably weigh in too. Most of the changes came in that second half, the destination management side of the RFP.
But this was the second
This was second RFP.
RFP
yes.
number 2.
Number 2, right. So there were changes to RFP number 2, as I remember.
Is there significant change in the scope of work in RFP 2 versus RFP 1?
I'm sorry.
Was there a significant difference in the scope of work in 1 versus 2?
There's one, they added global support services to the second RFP, which was not in the first. And there was
that cover different than the first.
it's added support that HVCB currently conducts for HTA. So that was added in the second go round. Update and maintenance of the website was added in. And so it's really it was destination management related focus. There was more clarity. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for HTA, but I think, this was the first time that they had actually gone out to RFP this massive contract. So I think there was a lot of clarification in the second RFP that wasn't in the first.
So when the collaborative process that you mentioned, who was in charge of the collaborative process?
The mediation or the collaborative process that followed the protest, I think it was mutually agreed upon that we look at a path forward.
Between you two and
Yes.
who?
DBED, HTA was part of it as well. But we had a neutral third party mediator that had come into play, Judge Broderick, who had tried to bring all parties together to try and explore a path forward. But I'd say it was mutually agreed on.
Okay,
I agree with that.
So one question was, so the big protest was still in DBED. So who was in charge when
what's that? Excuse me.
so I'm just asking, when you sent in the bid protest, who did it go to and who was in charge in HTA or in DBED? Who was the conductor before the mediator?
So when CNHA protested the first RFP, it went to both DBED as well as HTA. Because we weren't sure the process, because of course, the procurement for HTA is new for them. So we sent it to both DBED as the procurement officer overseeing HTA, but we also sent it to HTA's procurement officer as well.
So, but who was the one coordinating both of you before the mediator
Oh.
was selected?
That was the DBED director, Mike McCartney.
So Mike, so he was the chief procurement officer that was in charge of the protest.
Correct.
For RFP2.
You said,
Go ahead.
you said that procurement was new to HTA. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, they had to, I mean, this contract has never gone out to RFP in the past, in that where everything was together. And there's also a new law that was created in which they now are required to follow state procurement. So this was new territory, I believe, for the situation, the circumstance of this contract. I could be
There were previous RFPs, yes. They were-
Okay.
And we're at the end of the 5-year statutory limit of the contract, so that's why it went out to RFP. I think the difference Cahilla's mentioned is that it was under a state procurement versus the procurement exemption that HTA had.
Yeah, correct.
But the HTA did follow the procurement code, as far as I know, in the past, when it was awarded and it was broken down by major market areas, because there
Yeah,
used to be one contract.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I never compared it to the state procurement code, but it was, they're both daunting projects to put together,
Thank you.
yes.
When you got the materials you asked for in regards to the contracts, was it all at one given time or was it a little bit at a time over several months?
The requests we asked for,
Yeah.
as part of our bid protest, it took a while. It was, and there was 3 separate requests that we made. They're all eventually responded to, but it came over time.
Okay, and for CNHA, when you did your bid protest, were you given all the documents at once? Kuyo,
Yes,
all at once?
Yeah. I believe we asked for additional documents after the first request. We had some supplemental questions. But yeah, we got it. I think we got it within a week
Okay,
or less.
The initial documents were the rating sheets and also the proposal from,
Yes, we requested for a copy of the proposal as well as the scoring sheets, and we got both.
So you guys bid, so the protest came in
After you guys review the documents or before you guys review the documents, you guys put in you guys protest for the RSP?
The bus was post.
No, for you guys, after. And what was the determination why you guys are putting the first on the first, when you guys are putting you guys protest, what was the determination?
It was. We had decided to, because there was an outlier score and there's a, within state procurement as our attorney, our legal counsel, there's a process to deal with outlier scores. So that was one of the basis of our protest.
So they're saying that you guys got awarded the first, was it, the protest wasn't awarded and then later on, they award you guys, the protest wouldn't go through?
So when they initially awarded HVCB
Yeah,
and following that award, we protested.
yes,
And then rather than address the protest, DBED had opted to rescind the award and reissue the RFP. And so that the second time, we were awarded, HVCB had protested, and we are still in that phase.
so did Mike or anybody tell you guys why they had rescind the bid? I mean, all of the blues that you guys were protesting, you guys going through all this process, the procurement, everything, all of a sudden, boom, we take back the bid. I mean, there's have to be something like, spending $6 million over bid, there's something to go like with the University of Hawaii, I think something drastic. What was something drastic within this bid that the D-bid or the procurement guys had to pull the bid? I mean, I still don't see it here.
We might have to ask, we're gonna ask the procurement officer.
Oh, sorry.
Why they,
Sorry.
yeah. When the governor announced on October 6th, this collaborative model, what was the timeline he gave both of you? Because my understanding from talking to those who were involved is that November 1st they would have hoped the contract would have been awarded. What did this collaborative model would have been finished and then it would have been.
I mean, we were hoping for an expeditious outcome as the law specifies. We were in regular contact to ask that question. But
the collaborative model, if October 6th is when they announced it, when did you two expect to have something resolved and have a contract?
There was a concerted effort in the mediation to get something done in the month of September by all of us.
mhm,
And so, and we did, and then shortly, I guess it was October 6th, it was a press release, I believe, that went out.
Okay,
Yeah, that was after that.
and the resolution would have been what, 2 separate contracts?
I don't remember what it exactly said. It might be as I remember, there was a number of approvals that DBED had to get an approval for this type of these types of contracts. So there were still things to do, but in terms of the parties involved, CNHA, HTA, HVCB, we had agreed to an agreement and a model to go forward and essentially in 2 separate contracts.
2 separate contracts.
Mhm.
One for, what were the
Right.
2 contracts?
Yeah.
What were they based on? What were the,
HVCB was essentially the marketing portion, the destination marketing, and CNHA was.
we were doing more of the destination management related activities with
Okay.
some degree of marketing.
and what were the amounts for each contract?
It was just over 20 million each.
Okay, and the original RFP was for how much?
I believe it was a multi-year contract, which totaled about
34.
34 million.
Okay, so they added additional monies. Okay. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if we can hear from HTA. And then if you can just go straight into the timeline for the RFP. And then your role in handling the protests.
Thank you. Thank you, committee members and Mr. Chairman. John DeFries, President and CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. I am joined by Kalani Ka'ana'ana, our Chief Brand Officer.
Welcome back.
This particular RFP and contract comes out of the branding section. Kalani served as Chair of the Evaluation Committee for both RFPs. And so the timeline, Mr. Chairman, is October 5, 2021, the RFP is released. December 10, 2021, the contract awarded to HBCB. December 17, 2021, CNHA protest letter is received. December 30, 2021, the HOPA, Head of Procurement Agency, or Director McCartney at DBED, resumes the RFP. This takes us down a separate RFP track, where in April 15, 2022, the second RFP is released. June 2nd, 2022, contract awarded to CNHA. June 21, 2022, HVCB protest letter is received. October 5, 2022, DBED issues press release announcing potential pathway towards a resolution. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to go on to the next bullet point about HTA's role in handling of the protest from HVCB, I'd just like to point out that we're still in an active procurement and we'll cooperate as best we can with the information that has already been made public and look forward to the questions that we'll receive. Our role was limited to primarily providing the DBED director with any information he needed to conduct his work. Also, the staff worked to extend HVCB's current contract initially for 3 months to June 28, 2022 through September 28, 2022. And then for 6 months, September 29, 2022 through March 31, 2023. In so doing, HTA sought and obtained State Procurement Office approval. With SPO's approval, we also extended the current contract from January 1, 2022 through June 28, 2022, after the HOPA rescinded the first RFP. Staff updated HTA Board of Directors on the status of the RFP and discussed questions and legal issues of the RFP with its legal counsel during an executive session on October 27th, 2022, at our board meeting. And I'll stop there.
Okay. Between the first RFP and the second RFP, what prompted the changes between the first and second?
Okay, I should point out, and I'm sure Director McCartney will, there's an actual letter that rescinds the first RFP at his discretion, which prompted us, from what we'd learned by going through this process, to come out with a revised RFP the second time around. I'm going to ask Kalani to weigh in on that particular aspect of it.
Sure. Aloha members, Kalani Ka'ana'ana, Chief Brand Officer at the Hawaii Tourism Authority. To your question, the primary differences between the first one issued in 2021.
No, why were they different? Did the board take action? Was it an executive decision?
I would say we wanted to provide greater clarity in the procurement.
We meaning the
Staff at HT.
Okay. Okay. Did the board need to approve the changes?
No, not my understanding that they needed to.
But the first RFP, did the board approve or did the board give input?
Did the board, so just to clarify the question, you're saying, did the board approve the language of the RFP?
Or what you were trying to accomplish at least with the first RFP?
Yes.
but then but there was no input from the board on the second RFP.
There was, so before both were issued, the board had approved the issuance of and the funding to support those procurements.
So the board approved the changes.
The board issued policy guidance to staff about issuing a procurement for the US major market area.
Which included the changes.
Yes, and so ultimately, yes, they were consulted.
Okay,
Sure.
and they took board action.
I'm not sure, I'd have to check. I don't know if they took a formal vote at the full board.
But it was discussed in a full board.
I discussed with members individually in
Oh.
my market research and planning for the procurements. I discussed with members of our board, community, others, what they felt like should be in the procurement as part of our process. So all of them were given that opportunity.
But nothing public.
No,
Senator Kim.
Can you share with us what precipitated the rescinding of the protest?
I'm gonna leave that to Director McCartney as HOPA, because ultimately that decision was made by him.
Yes, but was there anything that HTA did or said or wrote or felt that you needed or expressed that you needed for the contract to be rescinded?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. So in the letter provided to both offers at the time of rescinding, I think is the only document I'm aware of that we provided to offers for the reason of rescinding the award as well as canceling the procurement.
Okay, my question is, what was your role in canceling? What, was there any discussion that you folks had during this protest? You awarded the contract, right? You awarded the contract to HVCB, then it was protested. And then the decision was made to rescind it,
Correct.
right? What went on at HTA that caused you to request or want this to be rescinded
That decision was made by the HOPA,
by,
Director
But
McCartney.
with no input from HTA?
with whatever documents and information that he requested, but the ultimate decision was his and his alone.
And your procurement officer is who? Your HTA procurement officer is who?
At that time, the procurement process was being handled by our chief administrative officer, Keith Regan. But the actual procurement authority rested with the director of DBED.
Okay, so at the time Keith Regan didn't see something that was wrong with it that needed to be rescinded that you are aware of?
Let me get, Keith is in the, is here
Yeah.
as well,
He's in the back.
and I can have him here. Keith, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Keith Regan.
Good morning.
I'm not the Chief Administrative Officer for Hawaii Tourism Authority, former in that position, but I'm now with DCCA.
Okay, so Keith, at the time, were you a part of the decision to rescind? Were you surprised that it was rescinded? What?
You know, it's a process. Procurement is a process. And that decision rested with the HOPA in terms of rescinding it. As John mentioned, we provided all the information and documentation to the HOPA to make that decision on behalf of DBED and HTA.
Okay, so for people who don't know, can you spell out the
Oh,
acronym?
head of procurement, purchasing agency, which is essentially the chief procurement. Well, there's only one chief procurement officer in the state, but in essence, it is the chief procurement officer for DBED and the attached agencies. And as we've lost our exemption, we were then underneath that umbrella.
Chair? I have a question.
Okay,
So you were the procurement officer at the time, when the big protest came in before the rescission. What were the actions taken? Because you needed to address the protest, and what was the decision there? Was that the basis for the rescission? What did you do?
Are we talking about
The RP one,
okay, I was not involved. I was not the chief procurement officer at the time. That was another individual, Ronald Rodriguez, who's no longer with HTA. He was the procurement
okay, so
officer at the time.
so John or Kanani, if anybody can answer, what happened when the bid protest came in, what was the process before the rescission within within HTA?
Well, Ron actually submitted a draft letter rejecting the protest. So somewhere that the process must have included some discussions with Ronald at the time. He drafted something and then things things
You're
occurred
correct.
and then,
Let me state that Ron had the authority as the procurement manager to make the award, which he did, and he based it off of the scorecards that he had reviewed from the evaluation committee. Kalani, you can speak to what that exchange might have been between the committee.
so maybe give a timeline, I
And
think,
Ron.
because all we have in our exhibit 18 is the letter from Ronald Rodriguez to Director McCartney, John DeFries, George Cam, David Arakawa, and I think Kalani. And it says here, Ronald Rodriguez, Procurement Officer, Senior Contract Specialist, and he drafted a letter to CNHA rejecting the protest, denying the protest. So that was part of the process. So what happened before December 21st and what happened after December 21st for you to decide, okay, we're going to just start all over?
So I'm gonna try to speak plainly because the technical part is what I'm getting stuck. So generally speaking, as was mentioned earlier in the testimony, the scoring was very close in the first RFP. As such, what I looked at in my role as Chief Brand Officer was, were we clear in the scope that we were asking for? Did we offer enough clarity to offerers as well as evaluators in giving them the information to make a good offer?
So was that before or after December 21st?
I'm not sure, Senator. I'd have to go.
Because
check.
at this point, it seems like you were going down the path to, you awarded the contract, now you're dealing with the protests. What you're talking about sounds
Yeah,
later.
and I'm speaking in my role as the Chief Brand Officer, right, not as a procurement officer, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of what I was asked to do, which was, again, provide clarity around what we were asking between the RFP in 2021 and 2022.
I'm just trying to get
Sure.
to what she's asked, what Senator Milwaukee asked is, what's the timeline of, it was issued, there was a protest, what happened between receiving the protests to sending out a new RFP? What was the chronology?
There should have been a decision on the protest before going forward. So what happened then?
So I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to put it in
Yeah,
a time period. Because it sounds like that was after the decision was made to not send the protest letter out and to start again. And then you probably thought, okay, if we're going to start again.
yeah, then how do we clarify? How do we add? Yeah, and
So I think
So
you
just-
might-
just
yeah.
To clarify the question, so Rodriguez sends this draft letter to someone. Is it to John or is
No,
it to the board?
Exhibit
And-
18, Mike McCartney, John DeFries, George Cam, David Arakawa, and Kalani.
Okay, so what was the decision there made? So that you could say, we're gonna go with the protest, we're not, you have to either accept or deny.
So you get his letter, and then what happens? Who responds to this letter to say, sounds like you were gone already?
Yeah, well,
So-
I wasn't involved in that particular part of the process, but I would think at that point, and perhaps, again, if the HOPA is able to talk to
Yeah,
him,
he's on
it
the,
would have been in his court at that point in time to make a decision on whether or not to agree with what was presented by Ronald.
but when you
um,
get this, what does everybody say? Hey, Mike, up to you. What does everybody else say? And then to figure this out,
Yeah.
because you all get the letter, then what?
When we received the letter, at that point, from my
The
perspective,
draft letter from Ronald.
right,
Yeah, okay.
right. So we're anticipating that. And at that point in time, we're preparing for the HOPA to now engage fully.
Yeah, so I think that's what
Yeah.
Senator's asking is there a formal response or at least an email back from all of you saying, okay, Mike, it's in your court now?
Something submitted to him.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a formal, but we're in constant communication with him because as the director of DBED, he was with me in the oral presentations that were made. And we were not members of the evaluation
So
committee.
who ultimately makes the decision to disregard the recommendation from Ronald? And says, we're going to not take his recommendation and we're going to rebid. When did that occur?
That is a decision that is made on December 30 by DBED director.
Okay. And I guess no input is needed from anyone else. All the people who are on this email, no input is needed.
The input is, no, I mean, not anything that would supersede where the HOPA has ended up in his decision-making. But I can't recall offhand if there might have been conversations leading up to that. But at that point, I saw it as being wholly in his court.
Sure.
Senator
You
Rivera.
know, I'm listening to over here, and I understand you guys keep going back to Mike McCartney, yeah? So if that's the case, then why did HTA put out the bid? Why didn't Mike McCartney never put out the bid, first one and second one? It seems like you guys put out the bid, but you guys have no say, no power, no teeth, everything is gone. Right? So if that's the case, then why did you guys even put it out? Why did DBED never just put out the bid themselves? Because you guys telling us all the stuff that you guys did, you guys got a letter saying that the protest is denied. But then you guys see the letter and you guys, look. Hands off. I mean, that's what I'm seeing now. Here you guys going back and forth with Senator Momorocky and Dela Cruz. But it seems like you guys really was just going through the motion, but the power was with DBED.
Let me say this, that's one of the reasons why we did not want our exemption removed, so that this could have been kept only within HTA, right, subject to the state procurement office. But what we did was abide by a process that we had to comply with.
Right. What I'm saying is that you guys already had a decision within HTA, with you guys' organization, right? And then now, after the letter came in, what was your guys' decision when you guys seen the letter? Did you make recommendations to Mike saying, hey, we're gonna honor what he's saying? Says he sent out the draft that we're not gonna honor the bid protest because that's what he said? Or you guys didn't give any comment or recommendation to DBED, you guys just gave him the evidence that you guys had and passed it on to him to make the decision?
You know, he can speak to this, but I know that he did.
No, but I guess what he's asking you, what is the input you guys provided? Not what
Yeah.
the HOPA did. What input did you guys provide?
So you guys got the letter. What input that you guys provided with this letter to Mike McCartney?
Is, and I'll have Kalani expand on this, but
It's ultimately HTA's RFP.
right. But what we're providing is what we've learned through the evaluation, both the review of the written proposals and the results of the oral presentations, all of which is captured on the individual scorecards. So that becomes the focus of the input that we are passing forward to Director McCartney. And Kalani, you can expand on that.
Yeah, but it just still goes back to when you get this letter from Ronald, what's the response from everyone and who does it go to?
Did you guys agree with the
Yeah.
letter?
Well, at that point, what Ronald has done on behalf of HTA in his role as the procurement manager has made the decision. That is the recommendation going forward to Director McCartney.
Okay, but that's not what this says. I was just waiting for someone to say exactly what you said in an email. And then we all know, okay, now it goes to the HOPA. It just.
Yeah, I don't believe it's captured in.
Please see attached my draft protest response. And then you don't know what happens next.
No, other than there's quite a bit of verbal communication with the director, DBED director during that period. I cannot speak to whether there was an email. I don't believe there was one. Yeah.
Okay, so what approval did you have to extend the HBCB contract, the current contract?
All of them came from SPO. So we would file the appropriate paperwork for market research, and I believe it's like SPO Form 3.
Yeah.
Requesting a formal extension. All were granted. And so we have that documentation if you'd like it.
No. Well, my question is, then if you asked and consulted the SPO for the extension, why didn't you consult the SPO on this collaborative process?
It's my understanding that Director McCartney was in constant communication with the State Procurement Office. Is that what you mean? Like your question?
Yeah, because I mean, from.
So maybe I could just say it more plainly. As a result of moving under 103D, it's our understanding that Mike was the HOPA and had the ultimate authority for the procurement process. I think that's different than what I was used to prior to both 862 and 1147 that changed our framework. I'm not aware of a delegation of authority that happened from the director to the agency. And so in that way, I think it was handled a little bit differently. But ultimately, the authority rested with the HOPA was our understanding.
Yeah, but you took it upon yourself to check with the SPO on the extension.
In consultation with the HOPA, because he ultimately signs the request that goes to the
Okay,
SPO.
but that same process did not occur for the collaborative process. In
I'm
this
sorry?
case, you're saying, I don't know. With the extension, you're saying, in consultation with the HOPA,
HOPA had to sign everything.
we work
at
with
every
the
step.
SPO.
Yeah,
But that's not the same process for the collaborative process. It was, okay, hands off, it's up to the HOPA. He has to go figure out what the SPO says.
yeah, and I know when he can testify, I think he can clarify how he did what he did or why he did what he
But
did.
why weren't you involved in both?
In,
You were involved with the extension. Right? You said you were involved.
we
you
filled out the paperwork.
You worked with him.
Yep.
You were involved in that process.
correct,
But it doesn't sound like you were involved in the process in talking to the SPO about the collaborative process.
correct, I was not. I was not invited to those meetings.
Okay, and is it possible to turn one RFP into two contracts?
I'm not, I don't, the short answer is I don't believe it's possible.
Okay, but the collaborative process that was mentioned earlier was two separate contracts. One for destination management and one for marketing.
Like I said, I want to leave that there for the HOPA, because ultimately we were acting under the director's direction. And ultimately, I was asked to provide technical assistance to him in understanding our actual operations, functions, needs, requirements, and what
Okay.
we needed. And that's what I provided to that process.
Okay, so who wrote the first RFP?
I did in consultation with our procurement manager and our other team members.
And then who selected the evaluation committee?
It was the director ultimately selected.
The DBED director?
Correct.
Okay. What members of the evaluation committee of the first RFP were asked to be dropped off?
Nobody was asked to drop off. We asked members to continue, and certain members refused or declined to continue.
Okay,
And in one case, left employment
And one left.
Oh.
Yes,
from HTA.
okay. And then who wrote the second RFP?
I did in consultation with our procurement manager at that time, which shifted from Ronald to Mark Togashi, who in his capacity is interim chief administrative officer.
And procurement officer?
Yes,
Because
for-
Ronald was procurement officer, senior contract.
but Ronald left
Yeah,
after
so
the
who
first.
takes his role now is procurement officer?
Mark
Okay.
Togashi.
Okay. And so who was responsible for selecting the second committee?
Mike McCartney ultimately signed off on the evaluators for the second committee as well.
Okay, do you have in writing the request from the members to not to leave the evaluation committee or to resign from the evaluation committee?
I don't know if I have anything in writing. I called some of them and they told me verbally over the phone.
Okay, but nothing in writing.
Not that I remember.
Okay,
Can I ask
go
one?
ahead.
Was there a discussion that you should have a brand new set of evaluators? Given the situation, that it's a different RFP, or the intent was to keep the same evaluators?
I think our intent was to select evaluators who had the expertise, understanding, and ability to assess the procurement.
Okay, that's not the question. The question is, Was it the intent to keep the same
We
evaluators,
did ask them to.
procurement one to
Yes,
procurement
we
two?
tried to as much as we were possible. And like I said, some declined.
Why? I mean, isn't it a brand new, why would you have somebody that's already made a decision already to then evaluate the second proposals? You know, I mean, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
Hmm.
So why would these same people then vote differently?
Yeah.
I mean, does it make sense?
And I understand what you're asking, Senator.
But you guys wanted to keep the same evaluators. If nobody declined it, you would have had the same evaluator.
Potentially.
We would have,
So of the original, how many returned?
Can I look? I don't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, lots of information swimming in my brain today. I can pull it up.
Yeah, in the meantime, you can.
Sure.
Can you just tell us what is the HTA role then when you do procurements? I know this is new, this is the first time for you, but how do you see yourself? Because you're still administratively attached, even if procurement now is not giving you full reign in, you know, in procurement, but you follow the code. What is your role and responsibility versus when it gets kicked up to the HOPA? The chief procurement officer. It's usually in big protests when it goes up, but what are you saying, that you don't have that authority on your own contracts?
you know, we have the responsibility to formulate the RFP, right? We haven't a result in mind in terms of where we want to go with a contract. So formulating the RFP is important. Making sure that on a timely basis, the milestones that are for activities, submittal dates, review dates, if necessary, an oral presentation. Our task is to make sure that we're running that process and we're doing it in a way that's compliant. So we're turning to not only the HOPA, but our own deputy AG for that process.
But what about the SPO?
Our interaction, my interaction with the SBO is nil. Kalani had, because it's his department's contract, had more interaction with her on that, okay? And then once the award was made, then Director McCartney had the sole interaction with
Okay, so when the procurement exemption no longer applied, was there any meeting with the SPO to say, okay, what do we have to follow now that we have no exemption?
Yeah, so ultimately, so I'm gonna take us back a little bit. So 862 passes, veto, override, that doesn't happen until I believe July 8th. From July 8th, me and my staff, as well as our procurement team, all go under all of the procurement trainings that are required to receive the ability to work on a procurement. And that happened in that gap between the time that change happened legislatively, and then we were able to issue the procurement. So that's when we went through our training. Was that your question?
Yeah,
And the relationship with SBO, because you're new and this is
Sure.
all new, that, you know, we want consistent standards across the state. So, you know, you've got to kind of get into gear
Yeah.
for a big contract that's coming up.
Mhm.
What relationship was there with HTA?
I think a very close one. So I know Ronald, in that initial issuance of the RFP, was working very closely with SPO and their staff.
okay, so but when he left, who started working with?
Mark Togashi in his capacity as interim chief administrative officer.
Okay, so why didn't Mark talk to the SPO about the collaborative process?
So again, everything from our understanding had to go back through the HOPA, and the HOPA executed that process, for lack of a better term.
So, but why were you included in the extension, but not anything else?
We filled out the paperwork. So we filled out the forms that were required for the HOPA to sign, to submit. We didn't have if SPO had questions for us on the request for extensions, we provided the information requested.
And on the collaborative model that resulted, we were given constant reassurance by Director McCartney that he was in consultation with SBO and Deputy AG every step of the way. So that's why we went down that road.
Just to go back in a little bit, when you had the bid protest, what was the process there? Similar to RFP 1, RFP 2 also had a bid protest. Did you folks have your SPO Mark look at that and give you a recommendation as Ron did in the first RFP?
I'm
Was there a
thinking,
decision made by you folks before?
the short answer is no, not that I recall.
Why?
What was the process?
No, but why?
So who made the decision? And
Which decision? Senator?
the RFP 2,
The HOPA.
the bid protest that came in. You did-
No, but so that's different though, because in RFP 1, it's
Yes.
you do it internal.
Yes,
And then
there was a
then
recommendation
this
by
letter
Ronald.
goes to all of you, including your HOPA. But in the second RFP, that's not the case.
Correct.
So what's the process that happened that's different than the first one?
Again, I think the process in the second time around was cleaner because the line of authority was clearer that it had to go to the HOPA. And that
With
draft,
no recommendation from HTA? Because in this one, HTA is recommending deny the protests
Ronald recommended.
Wait, the
on HTA's
recommendation,
behalf.
the chair, the recommendation going to HOPA is that CNHA has been, the recommendation is that CNHA received the award.
Yeah, but you still have to,
protest.
you still have the HVCB protest. So in this case, you had the CNHA protest in RFP 1. And Ronald says we should deny the protest. What's the process after HVCB protests in RFP 2?
Again, so I'm going to try to speak plainly. I'm going to try to be as respectful as I can. I believe Ronald issued that recommendation prematurely. That's my feeling, is he should have consulted first with the HOPA before making the recommendation. And he didn't.
Normally you make a recommendation first.
I understand. I understand. And what I'm saying is we were directed that all of those decisions should be made by the HOPA. That was my understanding.
Okay, so is there any documentation as soon as the protest came in? Okay, in writing, this all goes to the HOPA. We have nothing to do with it.
I'm trying to find the right words.
Because that's what you're saying is that the second process, HTA doesn't even review, no recommendation, it just goes straight to HOPA.
Again, I'm trying to find the right words. I'm not aware of a delegation of authority that was issued to our agency, like would have for other agencies administratively attached to DBED for us to be able to do that.
To make a recommendation?
Typically, the HOPA would issue a delegation of authority to an attached agency to handle procurements. I'm not aware that one of those was executed for HTA for that procurement.
So
So they have to do it by procurement,
That's my understanding, but again, I'm speaking a little bit out of my lane, but that's my understanding.
So Ronald, I don't get this. So Ronald, you said earlier, worked closely with Bonnie.
Not necessarily Bonnie, but maybe her staff.
Okay, so if he worked closely with her staff and he made this recommendation,
I'm not sure if he consulted SPO on that draft recommendations that you're referring to. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he did.
okay,
Isn't it normal and standard procedures that the entity that is doing the RFP and was in on everything would make a recommendation? And if then the SPO, the chief procurement officer found that was something wrong, then they step in to make some changes or to deny or whatever. It's not, that's the normal process. Whether this is new or not, procurement code is not new. Procurement code is such. And I don't think HTA deviated from that a whole lot when they had it.
Correct.
You know, you pick the top 3, you pick the top 1, whatever. But the recommendation comes from the agency that's putting out the RFP. So all of this about, was given out to SPO, I mean, it's like you folks like washing your hands from your responsibility. And that's not supposed to be. You're still the entity. You're only attached. Do you have those names, by the way?
I'm pulling them up now. Sorry, I'm trying to stay with the conversation and sorry, I'll pull it up now.
So what I don't understand is the HOPA is only supposed to be looking at the procurement process, not necessarily making decisions. The decisions are supposed to rest with the agency or the department. But in this case, it seems like HVCB said, okay, we're not deciding anything. We're just going to defer to the DBED director. And you're nodding your head, yes. So
Yes.
I'm assuming that's yes.
Yes.
Why? Why did you guys do that?
Because if you're administratively attached, that means you're independent. You make your own decisions. And when there is a protest and you make a decision on the protest, then it can be appealed and it goes all the way up to the HOPA. But you, as the agency, know the content and what you need for your agency. So you should be in charge of that. But you're saying you weren't.
I'm saying I'm not aware that a delegation of authority that would have been signed by the HOPA was for the second.
But you don't need a delegation of
Yeah.
authority if you already have the authority as an administered agency. So are you saying that there was an agreement or that you spoke with the DBED director saying that you needed a delegation of authority in order to do what you already had the authority to do?
Perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but that was my understanding is that usually delegation of authority is issued.
So the actual decision was made on the contract by the DBED director and not HTA.
So we never got to an actual
No, but
contract. but
we established that already in the sense where the HOPA is only supposed to look at process,
The protest.
not necessarily be making decisions. If the process wasn't followed, then you got to say, okay, start again. You guys, you didn't follow the process, but we can get clarification from the SPO.
Sure. I just get a couple questions. Under the contract language and provisions on the procurement law, can the DBED and HTA keep extending the contract past the expiration? You know, you guys keep doing the HVCB, the extensions for the contract. Can they go extend beyond March 31st, 2023?
Each of those extensions was conducted with the approval of the SBO. So the answer to that question is we'd have to go back to the SBO. Let me say this, that the extensions were done to keep us in the market and to allow time for this protest to resolve itself. And so that's why we sought approval for that extension, all of them.
Okay, so do you think, do you believe that DBED and HTA follow the state procurement laws on handling this opening dispute over the state branding contract?
Good question. You know, I have not been advised by HOPA, SBO, or our deputy AG that HTA in any way violated the procurement.
So do you believe that if changes of the procurement laws are necessary to close the loopholes in order to prohibit further extensions and contracts expire on agreements with all of the RFP?
Well, training, I think they need
Yeah.
training, sounds like to what the existing laws are.
And also, Senator, if I may be so bold, we need the resources and the staff. I just want to throw that out there. It's been very difficult with the staffing that we have.
Senator McKay.
Thank you. No, I'm familiar with DBED's other attached agencies, like NELHA. Greg Barber is the procurement officer there. State Energy Office, Scott Glenn is the procurement officer there. And no other attached agencies to DBED have they relinquished as an attached agency all of their procurement to DBED. So I don't understand how we got to this point. Was it you willingly giving it up to Director McCartney, or did he take it from you? How did we get to this point where you're the lone attached agency to DBED that has absolutely no procurement authority.
Yeah, it's my belief that we were responsible for arriving at the award of the contract in both RFPs. And at that point in time, when the protest window came into effect, that at the time of protest came, he would in fact have the final say on it, and that we would respond with any information that he requested. But it is my belief that that sole authority rested with him.
Get that belief from.
You know, frankly, I didn't feel that when we lost our state procurement authority, that my office maintained that role.
But every other attached agency plays that role. Why would you be different?
And you had an officer, procurement, Ronald Rodriguez, and then now you're saying it's Mark.
Yeah, Mark's an acting role, actually. Ironically, both times the procurement person left right after the RFP was awarded.
Did you check with the SPO as to what your role is in the?
I did not.
Why not?
I should have.
That's your job.
yeah.
To know what you can and cannot do. So you never questioned it. Did your board ever question it?
No,
Something's wrong here.
Kalani, you said that you guys did work with the SPO on the RFPs or no?
Yes, Ronald would ask SPO staff for guidance, specific provisions included in the RFP. We're always checked with by SPO.
Okay, so we got in writing from the SPO that they did not participate nor were involved in the first and second issuance of the RFPs for HTA for brand management and global services that were due on November 12th and May 17th. So according to what our office gathered from SPO, they weren't involved in either RFP.
I mean, I don't know how they mean that, but I know that Ronald, because I got on a few calls with, I think, Chris was his name, like just asking for different things that we would need to, how the language needed to be sort of worked on for different provisions of the procurement. So I don't know if they mean like formally like sat in and advised and approved. I don't know if that's what they mean, but I know that we asked them questions for clarification on our language and our RFPs.
Okay, well, they're saying they weren't involved. You have the.
I just got the Wi-Fi password. I'm downloading it now. Sorry. That's what was stuck.
I'm just astonished at where we are here. Mr. DeFries, it's your responsibility to help frame tourism, figure out how much money, what that framework looks like, how much it's going to cost to get to a better place. And it sounds like you've kind of just relinquished all of your powers and responsibilities. I mean, the staff and the board seem to have absolutely no authority to contract out whatever is necessary to recalibrate tourism. Can you tell me what's the value of the Hawaii Tourism Authority if you have no procurement authority?
you know, I wouldn't take a broad brush like that to this. Frankly, going back to Kalani's point, we've been understaffed, and I can't speak more supportive of the staff and the work that they're doing. And you're aware of the results that we're getting in the market in terms of, I was in this room 2 years ago where chair wanted less visitors and increased spending. And we're hitting marks that we've never hit before on it. So while we're going through this process, the arrivals, the expenditures, what I thought was going to be a 4 to 6 year recovery is actually performing extremely well ahead of schedule. So I wouldn't say that HTA has given up all of our responsibilities. I think in this case, I'm just as interested in hearing from the others that you called to testify about the role. But I just want to make clear that it was my understanding that this decision on the protest rested solely with the HOPA.
Sure. I know you're saying, the process and all of this, you know. My concern is this extension, you guys already paid HVCB 4.25 million on this extension. So this is the, I guess, the troubling part, what Senator Glenn is talking about. Because you're saying, you know, we're in this process and we're hitting numbers and we're hitting all of these great things, but the problem is right now that we have a contract that is being half paid or half redone by paying the person that protested HVCB 4.25 million. So during the protest, we still continue to paying the person that didn't award. Maybe they won the first bid, but they didn't win the second bid, and it's on the protest, but we're still paying them because we got to do this thing to hit our numbers. How do you think that is fair going forward? Because just because we have them on board, are we going to continue to pay the agency? Because look how fast you guys went from the first one to the second one, and look how long taking the second one to now on all the decisions that was made. The second one, you guys wasn't in the game. You guys never get off the bench. First one, you guys was all in the process. You had the procurement, you had everybody in the game. But then somebody dropped the ball. Because somebody would go ahead and say, hey, his recommendation in the bid, declining the bid is gone. Now we're gonna have pull it back. First, the protest wasn't awarded because it wasn't whatever, right? And then the thing was awarded. Then it was saying that now we're gonna put a bid. Don't you think that you guys had a lot of say, a lot of things, mechanism going involved, and then the second one is like you guys went hands off? I mean, if I don't know if I'm the only one feeling that in the room, but it feels like that somebody told you guys, we don't know somebody because you guys don't like saying, and I understand maybe because you guys are afraid, but somebody told you, you don't want authority. I have the authority. Instead of you go and ask other people, like how Senator De La Cruz, Senator Hawai'i, everybody here to ask their staff or their people to go check, Senator Miley, hey, go check if we get this power. She go check, I go check. You guys never do none of that. You even admitted you never do that. Senator Kim and asked you that. So how is that being fair now that we're going forward? Everybody is ready to say adios for the new administration, and we still want to spend 4.25 billion on that adios, amigos. I just like no, because it seems like you guys keep going back to Mike McCartney, but then Senator Hawai'i just said, did you guys willingly give up this authority? You still never give us the answer. Who told you guys that you guys didn't have the authority? That's what we like, no. Somebody had to tell you. And I have a good feeling who it is, but you guys should tell us who told you guys. That's why you guys don't backpedal everything on the second one. First one, you guys all gone home. Second one, you guys are backpedal. Somebody told you guys have no power.
Yeah,
And we still like no, as the senators here, we like no. Who told you guys that you guys don't have? The only department that was probably told you guys don't have the power.
yeah. Our function in RFP 1 and RFP 2 did not change. Okay, the timeline changed, right, and the delay in the decisions. But I got to my conclusion. I work very closely with our board chair, right, and the board chair is in the room as well. But what I'd like to say is we collectively operated under the premise that on this matter, Director McCartney had the authority. Okay, and I was working in concert with my board chair, my board vice chair at the time, as well as Director McCartney.
So who chose the evaluation committees for the first RFP? HTA?
You know, I was involved, we were all involved in identifying names.
No, so you're saying that the process should be the same. But if you were involved in developing names in the first RFP, but in the second RFP, it was made the HOPA decided who's going to be the members to drop.
HOPA decided on both. Ultimately, the names were signed off by HOPA in both rounds.
Okay, and did you give recommendations and were involved in the pitching round?
did.
Yeah.
Recommendations were made,
Okay,
yes.
and then the RFP in dealing with the protest, your procurement officer had a recommendation, but Mark did not have a recommendation in the second one.
To your point, yes, they were different in
Yeah.
the protest part, yes. They were different. The short answer to your question, I think, is yes.
Okay, so did HTA follow the contract remedies process that the SPO has outlined?
Contract remedy, I'm not familiar with that.
Yes, 103D-701. So it's in statute, legal and contractual remedies.
I wasn't involved in the remedy process, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You're talking about like the protest and how it was decided and all of that?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was with Mike.
okay, but you're unaware if it was followed or not.
Yeah, I'm not.
Sure. You know, for the extension, how did HTA have, how did they pay HVCB for the current contract extensions and the additional 6 months in branding of global service, support services?
Sorry, Senator, can you repeat that? How did we fund
No,
it?
what authority do you have to keep extending the contract? And then where do you get the money?
Among, yeah,
So the monies, if I'm not mistaken, were appropriated under fiscal 22 ARPA funds that were board approved. And then with the SPO's approval of the extension and the amount we could extend to, we were able to go ahead and issue supplemental contracts to do so.
Who is we?
HTA.
Okay, so not the HOPA in this case.
Well, the HOPA is the one signing the request to SPO. So ultimately, he's signing the request that gets submitted. I don't know if that's a nuance, but yeah, he has to sign them.
Okay, based on whose recommendation?
Ours. And so Senator, I think to your earlier question about the fairness of it, my responsibility as a chief brand officer for us on behalf of the Hawaiian Islands is to ensure that Hawaii is a market and as a state and as the people of Hawaii, that we not drop out of the market completely. So my responsibility was to ensure that we had continued representation in the market during this time to make sure that we could be educating visitors prior to their arrival in the Hawaiian Islands.
I don't think he's questioning that,
Okay.
your motive.
Okay.
How many times can you keep extending the contract?
My understanding is we would just need to seek SPO approval. I'm not aware that there's a number of times that happens or not. My understanding is that we would go to SPO for approval for the requests.
Okay, so you could essentially keep extending a contract
I
for
think
quite some
our
time.
intention is to not. That would be my preference, is to get this settled. But if we needed to, again, with the intention of making sure Hawaii is represented in the US major market area, we would do what we needed to do.
so with the funds, that we to HVCB during the extension period, reducing the final award amount contract.
Would the,
So
so
the money that
basically,
you're paying them, is it gonna take away from the final award contract to whoever gets the contract? For doing this.
ultimately, yes, it does.
See, that's the part that I'm trying to explain.
It
So,
does.
you know, under this bidding process, these other guys getting the money, he's taking away the money for the. Yeah, that's the part again, right? Okay, thank you.
But they were, so HVCB and CNHA said that if they were both to get a contract, it would be about $20 million each.
Potentially. So again, in going through the process, I was asked to provide technical assistance about what scope and kind of work needed to be done. My estimation based on previous years, previous dollar amounts, yes, it would have been about there. Based on prior spending.
For two
What time
contracts.
period would that be for?
I used 2019 and some of 2021, depending on the programs, because some of the programs are new after the pandemic. And so we tried our best to find our best cost estimate for the functions that we discussed.
And then the extension of the contract, you've checked with the SPO on that.
Correct. And that extension is based on an amount from the last version of HVCB's contract and the last funding amount on a quarterly basis, essentially.
So what I don't understand is on certain things like the extension, you check with the SPO.
With the.
And then some of these other things, well, I don't know, I'm not checking with the SPO, I'm leaving it to HOPA.
So I don't know how to say this. Everything is going through the HOPA at some point.
But you said you checked with the SPO on the extension,
Yes,
but you,
because we have to. We have to get SPOs signed. I think it's SPO form 003, I think is the actual form. That gets signed by the HOPA. That gets submitted to SPO. They make a decision, they sign, and then it gets posted in hands. And then we're able to go ahead and execute the supplemental contracts.
okay. So what you're basically saying is unless required, you're not gonna check with the SPO.
We've checked every step of the way.
No, but earlier you said you have, he said he didn't check with the SPO, you said,
I'm saying like for the extensions. For the extensions,
Yes,
we
I'm
always have to.
yeah, so I'm looking at it. In certain cases, you're checking with the SPO because you're saying you have to.
Mhm.
And in other cases, you're leaving it to the HOPA or you guys are trying to. You're
Yeah.
deferring to somebody else. You're not checking with the SPO.
Yes, in some instances, it is the HOPA that is having those conversations, yes.
Okay, so I'm looking for a remedy that if we require the SPO to sign everything,
Hmm.
then now you would have to check with the SPO on everything, because it sounds like, right, you don't know when.
I'm not sure totally follow your question, Senator, but ultimately, like, there's some pretty cut and dry. In order to execute a supplemental contract, I need to have that signed form in place and posted. to
Yeah, which
hands.
requires you to check with the SPO.
Yeah, and I'm saying in order to check with SPO, that also is signed by the HOPA.
Yeah,
So in order to do it, the
but it's
form,
still, but you still end up checking with the SPO.
yes, through that form.
But in
yes.
other, in regards to this RFP process. You just. left
Some
it
of
to
that
the
was,
HOPA.
some of that was directed by the HOPA to do, yes. The HOPA took on that kuleana to say, I got this is my kuleana, I will check on it, I will work on it.
Okay, but you didn't check if they followed all of these other statutes.
Yeah, Senator, in my role as the chief brand officer, some of that falls outside of my responsibility.
Senator Wakai.
I see that everyone's doing all of this procurement gymnastics, trying to make this thing work out. Wouldn't it just be easier to just pull back this RFP and let out an RFP that has two RFPs, one for destination management and one for marketing? Then we don't have to worry about you're trying to like shoehorn in a hoof into a rubber slipper here, and it just doesn't, it's not going to fit. Shouldn't we just start from scratch and just begin the process anew with two specific RFPs for those two areas that you want to cover?
Chair Wakai, we, within the last 12 hours, we've had, conversations with the HOPA.
Should have
And
had this meeting a month ago.
no, and that point that you're making, I think is a point he wants to make, today. And,
It still doesn't matter if you have two contracts, unless you have people applying for both.
Right.
And we're gonna go through the same process again. We want to make sure that if
Yeah.
RFPs are issued, we don't go through the same process again. The left hand not talking to the right hand, not including the SPO. So it may be a remedy for this situation. But we still want to make sure that whoever applies for the new contracts, we don't have this situation happening again.
understood.
You realize an RFP will open the door to everybody coming in again, so you go through another process all over again.
Yeah.
Have new ones.
So the October 6th press release. The board was aware of the press release before it went out?
The DBED press release,
Yeah,
I'm not certain. Typically, if we get an advanced copy, we'll send it out to our board.
okay, so but you're quoted in here,
Right,
but some board members called and said that this is the first they had heard about it. When they saw the press release, they didn't know about this collaborative process. They didn't know all of that.
they did not, because they did not learn about it in greater detail until the following board meeting, which I believe was October. Yeah,
So why wouldn't you go and explain all of this to the HTA board first before you announce it publicly? Because if not, the board members are reading this thinking, what?
yeah, Well, what that is announcing is the extension, right? And the support of the three entities for the extension jointly.
No, this is talking about the collaborative process. They're working towards a resolution.
And it's a DBED press release. Yeah.
So you have CNHA, you have HVCB, but the board members have said that this is when they initially found out about it, when it was issued. It wasn't a discussion at the board meeting.
Wait, no. Yeah, this was an effort that myself, Kuhil, John Monahan, and Mike McCartney talked about. We were approaching the need for an extension, but we wanted to make sure that all of the parties were in support of it.
But what if the board disagreed with you? I mean, you didn't even have a
Yeah.
discussion with the board.
Disagreeing with the extension?
Yeah, what if they said no?
I believe that we at staff level had that authority to make that without the board.
Okay.
Now, ideally, it would be great to have the board's decision, but from a matter of timing,
No, so then why have a board if we're not good? This is the biggest contract you guys got.
yeah.
You're not including the board.
And I asked that you guys had the authority to go through the letter without having a board.
Every step of the way, we've got the board chair and board vice chair involved, right? And if at any point in time, and there have been points in time when we've been asked to take it to the full board, we'll do so. But we're in constant touch every week
But you just
with
said,
board leadership.
you just said that this instant that you guys sent out the letter, that you had the authority not to have a board approval.
Correct.
Who gave you guys, who told you that you had that authority?
Well, getting this issue resolved was a universal,
I understand that,
Clearly,
you
yeah.
just said that you have the authority. I don't know who gave you the authority, because see, you find out when you can get authority. But then when we ask you, how come you never asked SPO on other occasions, you don't know. But then we're asking you right now, you said you
Right.
have the authority to go ahead and send out this letter without the board approval. So if that's the case, then who told you that you had that authority to go ahead and send out this letter without board approval or even board acknowledgement?
yeah, there was no letter sent.
No,
I'm
it's
saying
it's
in a
talking about the
DBED
press
yeah,
release.
In a DBED press release is the point here. This was a well-known, right, because of the extended timeframe since the CNHA award and this protest
So is
process.
that going to be a policy where DBED will send out press releases and include you and some of the contractors, but not inform the board? Not talk about it. Because if that's the case, why do we need a board
No, we do need a board, and I think
for
that
the largest contract that you have?
the calls that you got from HTA board members were objecting to the extension or objecting to the fact that we were on a pathway to resolve this.
I think they were shocked that they found out about this publicly without having any discussion at a board meeting. The largest contract that you have.
That, yeah, I would have to address that directly with the board member because the knowledge of this contract is well known within the board.
So did the board approve going on with this collaborative process,
Board leadership did,
but not the board?
but not the full board.
Because board leadership is having conversations one-on-one.
Because I consistently seek out direction from them.
From the leadership,
Correct.
but you didn't have any board discussion, not even executive session.
This, no, But on the subject of the contracts and the RFP, the protests that were filed,
Okay, so when did the board find out officially that we're gonna take this collaborative process?
here's the whole point about the collaborative process was to put a concept together.
Yeah.
That each of us, Kuhio, John Monahan, and I would take to our respective boards. Right? The prerequisite to that was to make sure that the SBO signed off on it. And the deputy AG was okay with it, right? So what we're doing here is putting a concept
No, I
or a
get that.
resolution together.
But all I'm asking for
Yeah.
is, in most cases, the board would have to approve these type of actions for any organization, HTDC, HCDA, NELHA, HHFDC.
Yeah.
You can't just issue out
No.
your agency's largest contract and start to now change the process.
No, you're correct.
Because you
I'll-
changed the
so-
process from a
Yeah.
protest to this collaborative process.
Correct. In the interest of resolving the conflict.
But you
right?
still should get approval from the board.
That was the plan. That's what we did. Subsequent to this, we went into executive session with our board and went through in detail what the conceptual plan is made up of, right? So we did not,
No, you said you talked only to board leadership.
I talk to board leadership on a constant basis, right? Okay, but relative to this collaborative approach, it was understood that this was a concept that we're putting together that was subject to the approval
Okay.
of the HTA board.
Okay, so is the collaborative process on any board agenda?
It was a topic discussed in executive session to update them.
That you were gonna take this collaborative process,
It was a concept that we were presenting to them.
but it wasn't approved. There was no
No,
consensus.
it was informational because at that point in time, we're still awaiting a decision by the deputy AG and the SBO as to whether this collaborative approach will in fact work.
So when you're
It seems
talking
like
to the leadership about this and you're letting them know that you was waiting upon the AG and all this collaborative stuff. Because you just said you said Cohio and the other guy had to go to their board. And you guys had to go to your board, but you never go to your board. You only went to leadership.
No,
give them-
I did go.
So what did the AG say?
I did go to
He
her,
said,
right?
so you're checking on with the AG and the SPO,
Yeah, and
this concept that you've shared with the board, not approved,
right.
but then you announced it. So if you're announcing it, does that mean the AG and the SPO approve this process?
What we're announcing here is support for all the parties to come together into a
Yeah.
collaborative.
So did the
approach.
AG and SPO support that? Did they approve that?
Respectfully, Chair, I'd like for the HOPA to comment on that because he had that direct communication
So you
with
don't know.
7 deputy attorney generals. I do know, I was informed late last night. And
No,
I
but
think
this
that's
is
why-
October 6th.
I know,
So sounds from the chronology that you had the collaborative process, you shared it with your board. You're waiting for advisement from the AG and the SPO, and then you announce this. So in announcing it, it doesn't say this is tentative until we get SPO and AG's advice. This is announcing it. So by announcing it, I'm assuming you had the AG and SPO approval. Because why else would you announce it publicly?
no. And I think the HOPA's testimony will prove out that at this time, we did not have a approval from SBO or the deputy AGs.
Okay,
So what if CNHA said that there was an agreement to the extension? What are the process you guys would have to take after that? What if CNHA said, we don't think it's fair. We don't want to, we don't want you to give them the extension. That's taking away from money that we probably futurely gonna have. What if that had happened? What was the process then? Because apparently you guys have mediators, you guys have collaborators, you guys have all of this, but then no agreement. Because you just said SPO and the AG never agree when you and make this letter announce for this collaboration. So what I'm saying is, what if CNHA said, hey, I don't think it's fair to us. We don't want to collaborate. We don't want to negotiate. We don't want the extension. What would happen then?
You know, I don't want to get into a hypothetical. I think that there's a clear path that everybody's going to understand once Director McCartney
Okay.
comes forward.
Wait, why don't we get the HTA board then, if there's no other questions?
I get one more question for them. This was back in September 26, 2022. HTA issued out a separate RSP for the visitor education branding management services to Japan marketing. Yeah. What is the status of the RFP? And when does DBED or HTA expect the award contract coming out?
The short answer is the award was made. I think, if I'm not mistaken, closed the protest period at close of business today.
Okay, so you get who's the?
It was awarded to A-Link.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
The question is nothing to do with the requests that we're talking about, but Kalani, when did HOPA become an entity that is under the director? How long have you been at HTA?
I've been at HTA about 6.5 years.
Did we have at the outset when you were there, was there another person as a purchasing agent head?
It was always under HTA.
Yeah, who?
Yeah,
How far back? I mean, Ronald was the most recent procurement manager.
because in the organizations, and no different than what Senator Wakai was saying, is the agencies all have the responsibilities and directors for each divisions. So this is pretty unusual that a director of the DBED hold a division position. And I think that is a big problem, because it takes away the responsibilities of checks and balances. That's all I have to say.
So maybe if we can get the board members up.
Okay,
Thank you, members.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, members of the Senate, George Cam, Board Chair.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So how many board members have problems with the collaborative process?
I haven't heard anybody saying they have problems with it, but we did have an open discussion on an executive session on October 27th, where they expressed their concerns, and the consensus was they thought this was the best way if we're able to pull it off in terms of get the agreement and approval from SPO and AGs, but both parties, whether they were for CNHA or HVCB, understood the dynamics and the sensitivity in trying to resolve this in a timely manner.
Okay, but the announcement was already made that they were gonna try to work something out.
Yeah, it's been a discussion they've been having. The press release that came out on, I believe, October 6th was really about the extension. And before that, we had a discussion with leadership and about when do we share
Extension of what?
extension of the 6-month contract for HVCB to keep the market, still viable. Because at that time, if we didn't extend it, there would be no contractor in the interim. And at that time, from our end, from the board leadership, we did not have an agreement yet with CNHA and HVCB on their respective boards on this collaborative process. And we thought it'd be premature to introduce it to our board until we had their support. And that was in conjunction with this press release. So if you look at the essence of the press release, it was really in regards to the extension. And in the collaborative process,
It doesn't state the 6 months extension in the press release.
I believe that's the end of the press release is the extension. And what
Oh, the
in the mediation,
but the first paragraph says it's a resolution for the formal protests. And then the director says, I'm pleased with the progress that two organizations have made in coming together so we can move forward in the best interest of the state.
yeah, in terms of the resolution, it was really about them agreeing on a potential.
Normally you put the news that you want in the first paragraph, not the last.
Yes, I mean, you're the expert on that, but it was about announcing that there is a potential pathway forward. Because at that time, it was very divided on the two sides.
And then it says this, well, the last sentence is this extension agreed by all three parties will ensure continuation and important work.
Yeah,
So the board
if,
approved it.
no, we did not
So how
approve.
can they say that HTA agreed?
I believe all of that is with the agreement that we get board approval.
Oh.
You know, it may look
Good idea.
presumptuous on how you read it, but it was very clear to us that we would not move forward with.
It's past tense though here. This extension agreed to by all three parties.
The extension agreed to is basically the extension of the 6-month contract, which we did agree to, but not in terms of the
You said
mediation.
October 22nd.
No, October 27 is when we met with the board in executive session to explain the possible pathway forward with a collaborative effort that Michael Broderick subsided in.
Even though that was announced on the 6th.
On the 6th was that we agreed in principle from both parties, HVCB and CNHA, that there's a possible pathway forward.
Without board approval though.
Needing board approval, so board approval wasn't
Okay,
extended at that time.
It doesn't state
Yeah,
here.
no, but all boards needed to approve the possible pathway forward. The challenge in there too is that we needed to ensure that we're waiting on is SPO and AG's approval of this
Yeah.
possible resolution, and that's what we're
But
working to introduce.
That's not stated here either.
No,
This release was premature in terms of any agreement.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's not.
I think you're right in that extent in how it was interpreted. The main reason
It's
for
not-
the,
hey, don't-
no,
don't-
no, what I'm saying is the main
It was
reason
left out. It wasn't misinterpreted.
for the press release was about the extension. But there was also so much questions about, is this going to be resolved? That they added that language too, that they came to a potential pathway forward with the respective parties. But yeah, that press release was mainly about us extending the contract for 6 months.
Okay, the first paragraph talks about how you're gonna work together though, not.
Yeah.
And like I said, the last sentence is it's agreed to by all parties,
Yeah, that we would work together in finding a pathway forward.
but doesn't say that I still gotta get SPO approval, I still gotta get AG approval.
Yeah, but that is the case. We need to get all that approval, even today, in order to move forward.
They usually put out a press release when you're
After.
working on something
Yeah,
like this, because
We
it
could
was
do-
not even
we could do
close
better.
to. having
Yes.
agreement.
I understand.
But what I don't understand, Senator De La Cruz is saying, if this is about just the extension, why is the extension hidden on the bottom of the whole thing? If this is about the extension, it should have been right up in the front.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying that you guys don't know how, but come on now. You guys know how to put on a press release.
HTA is supposed to be professional marketers.
yes, yeah, yeah.
And then you just said you guys waiting for AG and SPO's approval, so, you know what I mean, you put out something that you don't even have that approval, but it's in there. It's in there, but nobody else over here can read between the lines.
I
You guys are
understand.
telling us these
Yeah.
things, but we can't read between the lines, especially how you're reading this at the ending part of the whole collaboration. Yeah.
I understand.
So what is your general process and what are you following in terms of what has to come to the board and getting approval so that in fact, this big contract, wasn't really disclosed to the board until after the fact? And then what happens during protest?
Well, the contract has been with the board from the very beginning. Now we're over a year of an extended circumstance and trying to resolve it. You know, and certain times when appropriate, we advise the board. Kalani updates us on where it's at, you know, pretty much monthly. And then on October 27th, we also had executive session because at that time we had more details about a possible pathway forward with all the parties, and we wanted to share that with the entire board where they could ask questions.
So what was shared with you when the contract RFP 2 was protested? What was the board, how did the staff give that information to the board, and what was the board's responsibility in that?
Our board responsibility in terms of the protests, you know, was just to inform us. You know, we gave them the authority to go with the RFP, which they did, even the second one that they submitted. And at this time, when the protests happened, it was just an update of where they're at.
But you didn't give an approval for this collaborative process.
We didn't give approval for the collaborative process. That was actually something that the two parties worked on together, and then we were included in their discussion because we knew that if the two parties didn't agree, that there really was no pathway
But
for the collaborative process.
how do you take one RFP and turn it into two contracts?
Well, that was the discussion that was among themselves in terms of the concept of what does this look like on the pathway forward, similar to what Chair Wakai.
But did anybody
Describe.
check with the SPO before they made all these? I mean, one phone call.
This whole process, the SPO and the AGs were included about the possible pathways that we were discussing. So they were included in all of this.
And you have that in writing.
I don't have it in writing, but that is definitely something that they've been informed along the way in terms of a possible resolution to a contested RFP.
The two contracts were what are the suggestions or options that the SPO gave to the agency?
At that time, there were two recommendations of possible pathway forward. One is possibly a subcontract where one is awarded and you can subcontract. The other one was to pull it back like Chair Wakai suggested and do two new RFPs from management and marketing. And then there were some other options that they were exploring in a possible pathway forward. I would just look at that.
Based on this RFP 2, that you have to go to a new RFP.
Yeah, just what Chair Wakai said is one of the options was to rescind this current RFP, which there was still a pending protest, and to reissue two separate RFPs for marketing and management. So all that has been discussed with SPO and the AGs, and then the two parties involved.
And you know that because you're involved in the discussions?
I was involved or invited in part of it at one point with Michael Broderick, Judge Broderick.
So did you have any conversations or part of conversations with the SPO?
I personally had no conversations directly with the SPOs.
Okay, so how do you know they were involved?
Well, it was given from, again, Mike McCartney, you know, in terms of he was in direct contact with them and sharing in terms of what we are, and it was shared in the mediation. Among the same with CNHA and HVCB, so we are made aware of that process
So you
and the
were
communication.
in the mediation.
I was part of the mediation. I was asked to participate.
But you weren't sure if the SPO and the AG even allowed the mediation.
From my understanding, again, sure is you know, no guarantee, but from my understanding, the SPOs and the
But
AGs,
is that misleading to the two contractors?
I don't know if misleading, they were all part of the whole agreement and
Yeah,
discussion.
but it still has to be legal.
Well, that was the whole premise, is how to ensure, first of all,
You want to check if something is legal first and then you proceed?
it's been in conjunction. Both, what's a possible pathway forward? And then how to ensure that it's legal by SPO and the AGs.
Okay, so is it your understanding that the SPO was involved in the first and second issuance of the RFP?
Yeah, my understanding is we went through SPO to
Okay.
issue the first and second RFP.
Okay,
I mean,
so,
we wouldn't have been able to do an RFP without SPO's approval.
okay. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but we have in writing from the SPO that they did not participate nor were involved in the first and second issuance of the RFP for HTA for brand management and global support services that were due on November 12 and May 17 respectively.
Yeah,
So
so
that's why I asked you if you
Yeah.
contacted the SPO or were you involved? Because according to the SPO's testimony or letter, they were not involved.
yeah, and I would just look for clarity and understanding of what they meant by not involved and our understanding of what we meant by they were involved. But in order to do an RFP, we need the approval from SPO, you know, so in that regard, they are involved, but in terms of drafting, writing, no, that wasn't their involvement in the RFP.
No, it said they did not participate, were involved. They didn't do it. They weren't even participating. Okay, so what I don't understand, if you look at the last paragraph again of the press release.
Uh-huh.
While work continues on resolution of the protest, a 6-month extension of HVCB's current contracts for U.S. brand management and global support services will extend the work until March 31, 2023. This extension, agreed to by all 3 parties, will ensure continuation. So why does CNHA have to be involved in that agreement? Because it's really just a contract between HVCB and HTA.
It was a contract between HTA and HVCB, but in a good faith effort, I mean, similar to what Senator Favela was saying, is CNHA wanted to be a part to show that they were in support of this extension at this time and that we're working on a possible resolution. So they were fully informed that we were going to extend the,
Okay, so they testified at the board meeting to extend?
no, they did not testify to extend. This was just, I guess, in reference to the letter that you see.
Okay, that's just strange because the contract is only between HVCB and HTA.
Absolutely.
Okay. Senator Noy.
What's troubling is why did the 2 parties decide on an agreement when the contract is made by HTA and the board? And with the amount that we're talking about, we're not talking about peanuts. We're talking about the biggest contract. So it's very troubling because it's kind of related to all the other boards, DLNR, no matter, and all the other agencies that have boards like HTDC and whatever. So a contract is implemented by the board, approved by the board. So why are we having 2 parties unrelated to government make that decision? It's kind of interesting. And that's all I have to say
Yeah.
because it's
I mean, that's just like getting 2 construction companies. One gets it, one protests, and you say, you know what, you guys go work out who's gonna do what, and we'll just award.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I agree. That's a unique situation. And just by the complexity and the dynamics of the first RFP being granted to HVCB and the second RFP being granted to CNHA. And of course, this lengthy amount of time that it's taking to resolve it.
I mean, there's only one RFP, contract.
Yeah, but 2 different times, 2 different people, 1 RFP. And through that time and reading the RFPs, and both had access to both RFPs, it became very clear, you know, that they looked at it from 2 different lenses. CNHA more from the community and economic development side, you know, on the islands, and HVCB more from a marketing end. Now, they did have offers of how they would do both, but through this time, I think they found out that their real strengths is if there's a potential to separate those 2 contracts, you know, and then that might be a potential pathway forward.
who made that decision?
Yeah.
Among themselves, both of them. We were part of that discussion, but, you know, confidentially, or they've been meeting throughout this whole process of how do we resolve and work through, because
Okay.
even whether one.
Did either of them check with the SPO?
I think you have to ask them. I'm not familiar if they connected with the
That's so
SPO.
strange. You're gonna award a contract, someone protests, and then you're gonna let the awardee and the protester go work out a deal
No,
without you.
yeah, that's not, it's more an RFI of request for information of, if you looked at this and you see it as 2 separate contracts, what does it look like?
But it's one RFP.
It's still one RFP and we're still under the protest. under procurement to be either awarded that RFP or possibly rescinding the RFP.
Yeah,
But this is a discussion that they had
okay.
in the best interest of the state, or what they thought their strengths were.
Sure,
Yes,
So,
sure. What is your position on the board?
Chair.
You're the chair of the board. So what I don't understand is that from probably day one, you know a lot more than what you sharing here today. And it wasn't a mutual agreement between the two. Was you guys influence in this meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know who the mediator was, and I hope we never fail. If it is, somebody better go get their money back. Bottom line is, you guys told them what is their strengths and what is their weakness. For the best for everybody, you guys should do this. That was the advisement from you guys. So correct me if I'm wrong, you can tell me what you like, I already know the truth. It was advisement by you and Mike, and the mediator, to go ahead and tell them, this is your strength, because you guys are really doing them. And because, you guys are community, you guys should go for this. And we'll separate it. With no SPO, no AG, nobody here knew what was going on, but that's what you guys decided. Don't keep telling me about these two groups. If we can bring these two groups in the room, we just ask, and we're gonna ask them the question. You know for a fact that I know that's not what happened. You guys told them this would be the best thing for both sides. When you guys went and pulled it the first time, added stuff to them so that CHA could qualify, and then the other guys could qualify, and you guys will separate them like that. You guys thought it was gonna be that easy. But because you guys went through procurement and other process that you guys didn't separate them, now you guys like go back and do what Senator Glenn said, we're gonna pull them back and we're gonna separate them. How is that fair? How is that fair to the taxpayers? Did we pay for this mediator? Okay. Okay, so agree for this mediator. What suggestion was for the mediator for meeting with this group?
Suggested by the HOPA, Mike McCartney, in agreement with all parties involved.
So that's what,
To resolve.
so that's what was shoveled downstream, and then that's what the people are supposed to pick up. The bottom line is this should have been orchestrated and done the correct way. SPO, AG, consultation with the whole board, not just you and some other guys, because they're talking about leadership. The breeze over there, the head of HTA, the only part that was talking started with you. And you were talking started with Mike, because you and Mike was pretty good friends. So you guys talk all the time, and you guys collaborated, and then you guys told the two bidders, this is what we offer you.
okay, I have a question for CNHA. So the press release said that you agreed to the extension of HVCB's contract. In what form did you agree, and how did they ask you?
CNHA was not supportive of the extension, and we were looking at legal options. And so coming to the table to have mediation and look at ways in which we could, if they were going to extend it, we wanted to know that there was some outcome that was ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Cam, that's
Yes.
different than what the press release says. You just said that everyone agreed to it. He's saying they did not agree.
Yeah, I mean, Kuhio can speak on his behalf, but from understanding, Kuhio was in agreement. And he was the one who recommended that we gave a joint press release with all the parties. But I'm sorry if that's not what you thought.
Okay,
To be clear, we were in agreement as long as there was hope for us to get a contract. So we knew we didn't want to disrupt the market. We didn't want to disrupt the industry. And filing a protest to any extension would have done that.
so how did this take shape? Who called you to say, hey, we're gonna extend this contract? Can you agree? Who calls you? George calls you, or?
It was getting to the point where we knew the contract, the existing contract was coming to an end. And so I was pushing, and Mike McCartney had said he planned to extend the contract. And so of course I raised red flags. Said, well, okay, well, you're giving away a contract that we were awarded, value to a contract that we were awarded. And so we came together to see if there was another.
We includes who?
CNHA was agreeable to come to a table to see.
Who else is at the table?
I was representing CNHA. HVCB had also, of course, been at the table as well, representing their interests. So the mediation or the conversation with respect to the contract, CNHA was involved because we weren't necessarily supportive of an extension without some kind of potential outcome or resolution to the contract dispute.
But he's saying he couldn't commit to any kind of resolution that ensures that either party gets the contract. You have to mediate.
I think there was a lot of hope coming out of the mediation, because the press release followed the mediation.
So it's really this extension agreed to under duress by one party.
I would say so. I mean, we didn't want to disrupt the industry and the marketing that was required. So we understood the need for an extension, but we wanted to resolve the contract dispute.
Any questions for anyone for HTA? Thank you. It was asked from one of the members that we asked the procurement officer to come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon, do you wanna-
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Bonnie Kahakwe, Acting Administrator and Chief Procurement Officer with the Executive Branch.
So Bonnie, you've been working on procurement for the last year and a half.
Yes, we have.
Standards. And you've heard HTA and its efforts to come under the procurement code more specifically. Can you tell us? And we have a message, email that you're involved.
Let's take all that.
Oh, you gotta-
Can you tell us how you were involved, if not involved? They claimed that your office was involved. How have you trained them or worked with them to come under the state procurement code?
Okay, so as required, let me explain. So the Chief Procurement Officer, of which I am of the Executive Branch, can delegate procurement authority down to departments, which we did, which has been done all these years. It's up to the head of the purchasing agency, or Mike McCarthy, to delegate further down. We don't interfere in his procurement authority. We just say that if you're going to give procurement authority to someone other than yourself, then they need to take the necessary training and also be delegated authority. And so we collect that information from them using the SBO Form 36. How he determines which procurements goes through him or which approvals he needs, we don't interfere in their day-to-day operations. And we tell them that they cannot participate or conduct any procurements until they've taken all the necessary training. And it varies depending on what method of procurement they're using.
Did he take all the training?
Yes.
So in
Yes.
HTA's case, everybody got the training, and this Ronald Rodriguez got the training. He was the
At that
chief of
time, I would have to
procurement
go
for
back to the
HTA.
records, but they took the necessary training for the RFP method. And we
So
have delegated.
when he left, was there any training of the new person who came in as their officer?
I don't
HTA.
recall that we did specific training, but they are told that before they can conduct, they have to take the training. So that's what they're required to do.
So going back to Senator Wakai's question about all the other attached agencies having the delegated authority in DBED, is this the only agency or unit that doesn't have that delegation of authority? Or were they given that?
I don't know what the director gave them, specific direction on their processes and procedures. So I don't know. I can just tell you that we gave it to him. He can further delegate further down. And then whatever his approval processes are, that's up to each department to regulate.
Okay, what role did SBO play in the issuance of the RFPs or resolution of the protests?
Okay, so when we got that email, we took a very narrow interpretation of that. We did not participate in the issuance of either contract, but we were in contact with HTA and some of their staff on specific types of things, like do we need to have this kind of language in the RFP? It could be the RFP template, it could be insurance requirements, it could be what's necessary for the evaluation committee, what's kind of evaluation factors, but they put the pieces together. We weren't.
They
involved in
is
the
who?
act- I'm sorry,
Staff at HTA?
staff at HDA, right? And it was Ronald at one time.
So
and I
that's
know
for
that was-
both,
Pardon me?
first and second RFP?
Yes, so we were, the only involvement we have is in questions about the components of the RFP. Because SBO does not have any expertise in brand management or marketing, but we know what components need to be in an RFP.
Okay, what about the protests?
About,
Were you involved with the protests?
no, well, okay, so the only involvement we could have had is what are the steps in the protest? And which is what, we were going to discuss later on today. And the steps of the protest are once a protest comes in and they have 5 days, within 5 days of the award to protest. Once a protest is submitted, then all activity basically it stops and the protest needs to be resolved. The procurement, the vendors or the offerers would submit their protest to the procurement officer. The procurement officer would then gather all the information he or she needs to have and then makes a determination. Generally, in general terms, we would hope that any agency would try to resolve a protest informally. If not, then they have to go through the process. So the process would be you either sustain the protests and then take corrective action, or you deny the protest. And if you deny the protest, then they have the ability, you have to inform the protestor that they have the ability to go to administrative hearing. And then that whole administrative hearing process goes on. And if that's still not resolved, then the next step is judicial review.
So you heard
Okay, So the collaborative process is not part of the,
No, it is not.
that's not authorized, that's
No, it
not
is
legal.
No, it is not.
I think it's
so-
unethical as well.
Okay, so you heard the board chair, you heard everyone's, I don't understand what took so many months to check with you to see if it was legal or not. Because it's October 6th. And then, we're talking about a month or two later, and they're still hoping that you're gonna say that it's okay.
It was never, we found out about the press release on a Friday. And then I issued a email saying that this collaborative or this settlement agreement is not a authorized resolution
And you sent the email to whom?
to the HOPA.
Only.
Yes,
Why wasn't it sent to the board?
I
As
did
well.
not have any contact with the board.
It sounds like similarly with other agencies have a contested case hearing. And
Well,
so,
if you go through
know, if
the
you go through,
administrative.
yeah, so the administrative decision-making rests with government. It's not another private entity.
No. It always rests with, the protest is resolved at the department level. And
So
then
what was the response when you sent that email?
I don't recall getting a response,
Okay,
except to say thank you.
So,
I mean,
so at what point do you see, I mean, you see this kind of unfolding, it's been weeks later. What authorities do you have to get involved?
we would not let a contract go. I mean, we would continue to escalate it, saying that a settlement agreement is not an appropriate resolution to a contract. And then we would, of course, contact the AG's office to make sure that they understand it as well.
Okay, so was the Attorney General's office of the same mindset where a collaborative process is not appropriate or legal?
I believe so.
Okay, so when HTA and the board says, well, we were checking with the SPO and the AG, there shouldn't have been any conflict between you or the AG's
It
office.
should not have been. I mean, that's what the rules say. Those are the options you have, either sustain or denied, and Office of Administrative Review and or judicial review.
We've had many issues in the state government. As an example, like airports, if there's a dispute with contracts and there's contested cases or some, indecisions that were made, contracts are stopped and then RFPs are started all over again in the future.
That can happen, yes.
And I think in most cases, it happens within most of all the agencies.
So when
Yeah,
is the letter dated to the HOPA?
October 10th.
Okay. And to your end, you don't know if it got distributed
know.
or?
No.
Was the Attorney General copied on the,
No, it was only two.
but you had conversations with the Attorney General?
Yes,
And they're in agreement?
yes.
So in your professional opinion, based on all that you've heard today, what would you recommend in terms of how we go forward? And we have an extension, but we do have a contested case really in terms of the big protest.
Well,
and
right
nothing
now, the
has been
protest still has
decided.
to be resolved. There's still outstanding protest. So the recommendation would be similar to Senator Wakai, is issue 2 RFPs, one for
Marketing, one for
marketing,
brand,
one for branding.
Yeah. oh,
Or,
destination management.
right.
Yeah.
Or my other suggestion would, which is basically the same thing, is issue 1 RFP with 2 components.
And that's to be decided between HTA and the board.
Again, I don't know what the relationship, what the board's responsibilities are with HTA.
No, but what
would
about the
accept-
HOPA? Who determines this then? The HOPA or the HTA?
Again, depending on what the HOPA delegated authority is down to HTA is what needs to be decided. Is if the HOPA is going to give HTA, or if the HOPA of any department is going to give any administrative agency, attached agency procurement delegation, he has to tell them, okay, you're going to run it yourself, or you need to,
Okay, so if they don't delegate it,
then it rests with the HOPA.
okay, so that means they write the contract, they send out the RFPs.
Well, when you say they, I'm sure they
HOPA.
have their
HOPA.
staff to actually,
No, so that's what I'm trying, is it the HOPA staff or is it HTA staff then? Because if
As-
it's not delegated, why is HTA doing it?
but he may have delegated it down to
Okay,
do
they just said it's
somewhere
not delegated.
if they didn't delegate it, then they could not have released the RFP under their name at all,
Wow.
because that means nobody's got delegated authority. And we would look at their SBO 36 and see if they had delegated authority or not. But again, that's delegated authority to do the procurement. How he handles his processing and approval may be different for every department.
So does it require for the HOPA to send you some kind of document saying, I am delegating the authority?
Yes,
to
it requires an SBO form 36 with a transmittal form saying these persons have delegated authority to conduct the 6 methods of procurement. They can have one of them or multiples of them.
And you didn't receive anything.
Pardon me?
And you did not receive that
No, I'm sure we did receive them.
to delegate the authority to HTA.
Yes.
So what is delegated to HTA and what is not?
I would have to look. I don't know. I don't know at all. I would think that they, at least maybe not every single one, but some may have been delegated small purchase, RFPs, IFBs,
So-
professional services, small.
But it almost
purchases.
sounds like in talking to both or you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have whatever is delegated, that's what's delegated, whatever is not is what's the HOPA needs to do.
Yes, so if the HOPA retains all delegation, that means he sends everything out under his name. He has to take all the appropriate training. His staff can put all the paperwork together.
Okay, so you can give us a copy of that form,
The delegations.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an SBO form 36.
a copy
I
of
just
his
need-
completed form, so that we know what's delegated to HTA and what's not. Because it
It's
doesn't
delegated
sound
by
like-
person. So each person has to be delegated procurement authority, so that we know that if
Okay, so,
Ron only has small purchase, that's all he can do is small
so
purchase.
John, who has delegated authority now? And what kind of authority does he have? So small purchase, what are the different,
The 6
I'm
members.
asking him.
Oh. sorry.
Yeah. Mark Tagashi in the acting role of Chief Administrative Officer is delegated that authority. So
no, what authority? Because it sounds like there's different types of authorities you can delegate. And I think that's kind of like what everyone's trying to figure out is what is delegated to the HOPA, what's delegated to HTA, and it seems like you can't just make it up as you go along.
yeah, you know,
So what authorities did the HOPA delegate to someone at HTA?
in a general sense, Mark has enough authority for us to operate on a day-to-day basis.
So small purchase only,
What's that?
small purchase?
Small and smaller. Yeah, I'd have to get the specifics to you to get the parameters.
No, because
What
if-
we're talking about with.
no, because if it's everything, then the original RFP sounds like shouldn't have come out of HTA to begin with.
In statute, there's already qualification on an amount that one can delegate or you don't need authority. And I think it used to be $25,000, but you're a big agency, so
So-
statute may have changed.
Oh, wait. what-
Okay, so Mark has procurement authority for all methods of procurement as procurement officer and to participate and conduct the procurement method. And he also has procurement authority on the e-procurement system for
What doesn't he have?
IFPs. Pardon me?
What doesn't he have?
Wait, let her finish.
For he has. So he has basically his procurement authority on all 6 methods of procurement. In addition to a procurement officer.
Okay, so why does everything keep getting pushed to the DBID director if he has all that authority?
That's up to the DBA director to make that decision, what he
Sure.
wants to,
I'm sorry.
what, you mean, they have the authority to conduct it. I don't know if the HOPA has decided that all approvals go through him first or all other actions go through
When
him.
that should be in a form or it's just
No.
random?
It's not in a form.
So it's just random. The HOPA can decide this contract I'll take.
Yeah, yes, he can. That's his job as the head of the purchasing agency.
So once he takes that contract and how do you let everybody know I'm taking this contract as the HOPA?
I don't think there is any kind of announcement or agreement unless they change the RFP and say on the RFP that procurement officer is now this other person.
Okay, so if these contracts, these RFP 1 and RFP 2, sounds like they're saying it goes to the HOPA. So, but was it issued by the HOPA or was it issued by HTA?
What I'm saying is the protest went to the OHA, to the HOPA for review. Okay, so that is the,
No, that's not true. You guys said the HOPA decided who was going to be on the board. The HOPA decided how with the 500 words that were going to be changed to the contract, not just the protests.
you're right. He signed off on the evaluation committee that in round 1 and round 2.
Okay, so it wasn't just a protest.
It was
So
not.
that's where we're trying to figure out the clear delineation of what was delegated and what was not.
I don't know that answer. I know that Mark was given delegated authority to conduct an RFP, as is the HOPA delegated procurement.
You
authority.
should think before you speak anymore. You don't want to keep getting into misrepresenting the facts.
That's not my intent.
But
Yeah.
he was, you've mentioned earlier, he was involved,
Correct,
not in just the protests.
correct.
So what's the understanding, going back to some of the questions between the HOPA and HTA into how this is going to work out in issuing this RFP?
We conferred with the HOPA on the entire procurement process of this RFP.
No, so if the HOPA is involved from the, can he piecemeal? If he can say, you guys are gonna issue the RFP and then I'm gonna select the committee, I'm gonna issue I'm gonna work on changing the 500 word.
That would be very unusual. For any agency to do that, to piecemeal it, because then you don't have continuity of, concept.
In the formation of the evaluation committee, both Kalani and I had extensive discussions about identifying the kinds of representation we wanted. So we were very much a part
But
of,
you're still, both of you mentioned, but it was a recommendation from you to the HOPA. It wasn't just you,
it was not just us. We did
And so-
confer with the HOPA.
but the contract came from HTA. The RFP came
The
from
RFP
HTA.
came from,
So that's what she just said. You can't piecemeal. You can't decide, well, I'm gonna take the first paragraph, you take the second paragraph, and then we'll decide who receives. I'm not sure how this is the arrangement that HTA and DBED has. Doesn't sound like you're sure either, though.
no, I mean, we've been conferring with the HOPA from the outset of the procurement
Okay,
of
but
this
you said you
RFP.
can't piecemeal the RFP.
I
You
understand.
can't piecemeal delegation. Okay, so go on the protest then, your involvement.
Lost my train. My involvement was only that we have a protest, what are our next steps? And then we would just tell them what the next steps are, quote the statute or the rule. These are your next steps.
Okay, so when do you guys get involved to say, hey, you can't issue the RFP like that? It's either has to be delegated, it has to be clear, or you do it all.
We did not get involved.
No, when
in-
do you get involved? Because obviously you mentioned this is really unusual.
If they were to ask us our advice on something, we would make the recommendation, you should probably keep it all with one group or whoever the procurement team is, your evaluation committee members or whatever it is. You need to have one person, unless of course that person is no longer there, to keep so that the language is consistent, everything is consistent.
Okay, and this was all, you and the Attorney General are in agreement.
We're in agreement that a collaborative or a settlement agreement is not an authorized form of resolving a protest.
Who's from the Attorney General's office? Can you come forward, please?
Good morning, Deputy Attorney General Brian Yee.
Good morning, well, good afternoon.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify the AG's opinion on a collaborative process.
So if I could just, lawyers are all about definitions. If by collaborative process, you're referring to the settlement agreement. We have, there's a different issue as to the outcome of this collaborative process and the authority to engage in a process of settlement and resolution. So as we read your question to us, it was what is the authority of the DBED director to engage in a process of settlement? And for that, there is statutory authority under 103D-701B. Now, the outcome of that settlement discussion then has to be evaluated on an individual case-by-case basis.
So two contracts coming out of one RFP.
We've because this involves multiple agencies and multiple clients, I can't I'm uncomfortable discussing what our recommendation has
Okay, it
been.
doesn't have to be this contract. Can any RFP result into two contracts?
I can answer that. So depending on the solicitation itself, there have been multiple awards, but it has to say in the contract or the solicitation documents, our intent is to award to 2, 3, 4, 5 contracts. And then the process, how those selections are going to be made. Sometimes it's geographical, sometimes it's by grouping, sometimes it's by commodity. So it doesn't preclude them from doing a multiple award. But it should state in the solicitation that that's the intent of the solicitation, to do multiple awards. And
SPO does multiple awards all the time.
So
Okay,
it's
but
not in the
that
law.
was not the case.
I
Wasn't
don't
usual.
believe so.
And so why didn't the Attorney General advise them that wasn't the case?
Well, that wasn't the
I-
solicitation itself, so
Yeah,
I don't know
so-
what happened after that.
Yeah, so
So at what point did they ask the AG for advice? Only after the press release went out?
we were not aware of the press release
Okay, so you
but
weren't aware of that.
prior to the press release, obviously.
Okay, that's a little different from what I'm hearing from some of the board members, but. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I will say that TBED is moving forward now with advice from council.
after the fact.
Depends what fact you're referring to, but
After the
they're
press
now
release.
after the press release, yes.
But you were never involved initially in terms of RFP two? And all the way up when the protest was first submitted?
Any RFP would need to have our signature on it before being issued, so I'm sure we reviewed and approved.
What about the protest? When
the-
the bid protest came in,
Right.
did you advise?
So normally we would advise the client as requested on bid protests. But I can't comment on this particular example.
But did you or did you not?
Right, so I can't comment on this particular example. I will just say that we are always available to answer any questions our clients
They
have.
have to ask you.
We do not, I was gonna say, don't actually require AG approval before the resolution. So if a client looks at a bid protest and denies it or grants it, they could make that, nothing in the statute requires they get our approval. Typically, however, they will do it upon advice with us.
But what did you?
Okay. And is it
advise?
normal for a third party to agree to an extension?
We
So
don't require a third party. The only requirement we have is that the agency involved and the contractor involved want to have this extension. We're talking about the extension of the HVP
Yeah,
contract.
yeah.
So because this extension was not subject to an existing contract, I mean, sometimes you have contracts with built-in extensions. So after contracts expired, if an agency needs to extend it because, for example, they're
Yeah, you don't want, like he said, he doesn't want to
don't
leave a
wanna lapse.
vacuum,
right,
but
that would need.
is that normal for a third party outside the contract?
It does not require approval from anyone other than the issuing agency, the special procurement officer, because a specific procurement exemption is needed, and of course, the party who's signing the contract.
So why did they need to include CNHA to see if they agreed?
I don't think you're asking a legal question. I think you're sort of asking a policy question as to why they would want to do so, and I'd have to.
So did
refer
they
you to
ask
that.
your advice on this?
I can't talk about what they did or didn't ask for advice on.
Okay. So you didn't approve this press release? You didn't see it, anything?
Press releases don't require approval, no,
Okay.
and we did not see it, obviously.
So what happens when she sends a letter after this press release goes out, and what's your involvement?
Generally speaking, as I said, we're always available for the client when they have questions. I can't comment on this particular process.
Yeah, but they only ask you questions after the press release, though.
They only asked us questions about the outcome of the press release is I think what you're asking. We were not aware of the outcome until we saw the press release.
Okay, well, this is a big contract, and according to what the agency said, that they were in consultation with both of you as this went out.
So I'm not saying we weren't involved in the protest. I'm just saying because you're talking about a general category of so we're certainly aware that a protest came in. We're aware that there was discussions. We were, but in terms of the outcome of this resolution mediation, I think we were informed. Is my understanding after the decision was made. After the decision amongst the parties was made.
Okay, so in regards to the evaluation committees, what advice did you give? Or did they comply with administrative rules?
I think. Well,
Because there's Administrative Rules 3-122-4501 on the evaluation committee.
Right, so I can't comment on this particular example, so I wouldn't be able to answer your question.
Okay, so if there's a violation, is there a penalty?
If there's a procurement violation,
No, if there's a violation on the rules, the administrative rules.
if there are potential penalties for violations of procurement rules.
Okay. Did you review the scoring process that was used by the two evaluation committees? Did either of you?
I did not.
We would have reviewed the RFP.
Okay. So you wouldn't know if there's a violation in the scoring process.
I would not have known.
And if there's a violation, is there a penalty?
There's potential penalties, as AG has referred to. It does take some consultation with the AG's office to pursue those violations in any administrative and or judicial reviews.
Okay. So what's the recommendation to move forward then?
I think DBED is moving forward with advice of counsel, but again, I can't discuss what we specifically informed DBED.
Okay, well, thank you for being so helpful.
I'm sorry.
But I wish you were involved a lot sooner instead of after the press release, because I think we would have saved ourselves a lot of heartache.
Just one more question for AG. How involved are you in each agency? Or let's just say HTA, which is administratively attached. Only when they ask you questions, you're not dedicated to your agency that yours.
Right, so it really differs by agency.
But when you see a red flag, you don't do what she did and say, hey, we got a problem. You just wait till somebody asks you.
Typically, if we see a violation, we obviously will tell the client, but we don't.
Did you say anything when you saw this?
Once again, I can't discuss any discussions we had with our client.
Okay, well, did you have a conversation after you saw this? And was it initiated by you?
DBED is moving forward with advice from
Okay,
us. So obviously we had a discussion with them subsequent to the press release.
Because we all need to protect the state and the state's interests. And so when you see something, you got to say, hey, I think something's going, we got to change this. So I give you credit for doing that when you saw that. Because that's better than letting the house burn to that. Any questions for AG or procurement officer? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. DBED. Yeah, go ahead. DBED, yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mike McCartney from DBED and otherwise referred to here as the HOPA.
We all have several names, I guess, for each other. What I don't seem to understand is what exactly is delegated from DBED to HTA, because it sounds like parts of it are, parts of it aren't. And
so, Mr. Chair, may I just give you a contextual thing? As I was trying to, and working with them to try to help them, because this was a change in the law. And prior to this, HTA had an internal process. And so if you had a complaint or somebody went and had a complaint, it would go to the CEO, which I used to be. And then if the CEO couldn't resolve it, then it would go to the board for a vote. So under the procurement law, it's a little different process. So we're all learning as we go to try to get stuff done as quickly as possible. We had ARPA funding, we didn't have special funds anymore. And so it was all that kind of transition with money and time. So we were all trying to work with each other and help each other through this learning curve. So the intentions were always that to do that. And so the delegation I delegated the authority to them And they have that delegated authority in the forms based upon the training they receive, right? So they have to certify that they received the proper training from the procurement officer and went through the training. And then I can delegate authority to them like all the other departments. I understand what you're talking about too regarding the governance and how decisions are made there. And all those kind of things can be clarified or rectified. You know, it may be good, better practice, but I think that the challenge has just been, you know, trying to do the right thing in the right way. We know this is a big contract and we tried to handle it in the best way possible. And so, and I just want to clarify too, that I do have advice of counsel. My counsel is Greg Kinkley, and we have good conversations, and Bonnie has been very helpful to me. And that letter that we have, that we sent out, the press release, I did have it looked at by, I went in to see Bonnie and her staff and show her that, but she may not have understood all the ramifications of what was happening with the process. She helped to look at it. I had Greg Kinkley look at it. He looked at it, had all the parties looked at it. I didn't send it out till we had the extension. And if you read the letter, it says subject to due diligence.
Okay, the other attorney general said they didn't look at it, but
I did that in the board meeting, but again, those two, I'm not speaking for them, but they may not have been able to communicate with each other because Brian is his supervisor. But Greg looked at it at the board. We looked at it. I had everybody take a look at the press release before we sent it out. But so I think to summarize everything, after Bonnie sent me that letter, that form, because I think if you read that email, it says the AGs saw the newspaper article and felt uncomfortable with it, and that you should either do one of two things. That's when we started to act, and we had meetings with AGs, and the last meeting that we had was on Tuesday. What's a day? This past Tuesday. And all of us got together from all the different departments with the AG, her deputy, and I think there are 9 of us in that meeting. And we talked about what is prudent and appropriate. And so since then, I've been working on, and I have today.
And that's with the whole board.
No, I'm talking about the AGs.
Okay.
Yeah. So
when you said all the agencies, so HTA
yeah,
was in that?
no, in all the agencies, so people, AGs that maybe represent the whole, the SPO. There's agents, there's AGs that represent DBED, you know, and then there's the AG. So we all had good collaborative meetings in there to talk about what was going on. And so I've been able to make a decision.
So the HTA board not included?
No. Because when we went into the mediation, and that, because I wanted to find a path forward and avoid a dispute. Because if we had a dispute, it would go through this lengthy process beyond me to administrative hearing, the DCCA, and then probably likely to be appealed in the courts. And then we would be left without having a contractor one side or the other. The reason why they went for the extension was to ensure that we have presence in the market. So again, this is all new to HTA. In the past, we would have had it resolved at the board level, and the board has 12 members, a very diverse and dynamic organization, and it would be a 7-5 vote. So I think it is prudent to try to look at what kind of processes can we put into place going forward that would satisfy the legislature in accountability and make those kind of adjustments so that everyone's clear on practice. So I'll be the first to admit that the transition from going one way to the other was difficult, and we all tried to help each other. So there were no deliberate steps, or nobody did anything to try to carry out things the wrong way. It was all good faith efforts. And so even going into the mediation, I was just trying to use a statute that says you can come up with an agreement. We used the mediation process and asked Judge Michael Broderick to do it and to help. But mediation is subject to, and if the parties felt forced into that, that wasn't the intent. It was just to see if we could find a way forward. And I made it clear to everyone that I don't have the authority, or neither do they, about what the process is, but can we figure out what the scope of work is? So what we actually came out with was better defining what is marketing and better defining what is destination management. And then we really discovered clearly that there are two different scopes of work, two different kind of contracts. Because even the first bids that came in, for the second RFP, and you look at the responses to that RFP that has it combined, HVCB answered it more like a marketing person. CNHA answered it more like a, community, based management, approach. And so we were able to diversify that. So what I'm prepared to do, and I haven't finished the paperwork, but I wanted to share before the meeting, that on advice of counsel, wise advice of counsel, that I've determined as the HOPA that we need to stop the procurement, and stop the award, and then issue 2 RFPs. That's HTA's Kuleana to write up the RFPs, come up with the scope, and put that out. I know that it hurts people like CNHA. They've been trying in good faith, and I think they were expecting and counting on the money. They want to be able to fairly compete, and so, but I'm sorry, that's kind of the part of the process in order for us to ensure fairness. So that mediation was an attempt to try to get everyone together. It did help us find a clear way going forward. And when we go forward, we can't involve the parties in writing the scope. We're going to have to do that. So even in the meeting that we had in the AGs, I asked, and I talked to the chief procurement officer. I'm recommending that they hire somebody off their preferred list to help them do this RFP so that they can just look at it strategically, not technically, so we can put it together correctly. And it's clear to the bidders out there where we have fair competition. I believe this could happen in a reasonable time so that the legislature, when you do your budgets and you're doing your plan, you can take all this into account, because all this is really subject to funding. And you wouldn't fund a result if it wasn't satisfactory to you, because there's no HTA funding going forward. We only have ARPA money to the end of the year. So this next year is the opportunity for the legislature to look at how do you create HTA 3.0, because the market, the community, and the needs have all changed. So, I take responsibility for where we're at, because they followed me along in good faith to try to find that solution. The AG advised me that it's not a preferred path and not in the best interest of the state, and I'm prepared to accept that and tell the parties that. I just informed them right before this hearing, and then last night I was working on all the documents, and then the volcano erupted. And we don't have staff, but that's so. Senator Wakai, what we're doing is implementing your recommendation, and we have enough ARPA money appropriated by HRS 29 by the governor just to the end of this year. So now it's going to be the legislature's call how you want to shape it going forward. And then I welcome the help about how to handle the procurement process better. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is just make sure that I'm making this decision in what I believe is in the best interest of the state and advantageous. I know it's frustrating for the bidders, but sometimes that's just the process. And I apologize for that. But I don't want anybody to think, especially you, Kohio, that everybody followed the rules, and then I know the pain in the industry and the pain in the community about tourism and the issues that we face, and the community doesn't feel like it has a voice. But with your involvement, I think it's going to, but we have to go through the process to make sure we can do it and it's sustainable. So I know I'm talking about all kinds of things to try to answer all the questions that came up, but that's what when I first came in to say I wanted a recess, I wanted to, I have the preliminary documents here that I was going to sign today and stop it and then go forward with the recommendation. And so and it's taken some time to get all the AGs together. So from that date, we had a couple meetings, and that last meeting was on the last week Tuesday, and then you coincidentally asked for this hearing, which I think is very helpful. So I think it helps to clarify the gaps that we have and then how do we fill them so we can execute and then everyone has confidence in us.
So what involvement does the board have in determining, oh, you know what, we should do two RFPs? Or was this
I
just,
think that is going to be their call. It's going to be my recommendation. But they have to make that decision as a board because they're the agency, in my mind, that is responsible for administering the money and HRS 201B.
okay, so the process is what? You're gonna cancel the RFP that went out, cancel the award.
And the protest that HVCB has is null and void. So I'm not ruling on the protest.
Okay. So then now what? The board has to have a meeting to determine if we're gonna do two
Yeah, I
contracts or
mean,
not.
Yes. And that is the preferred path as recommended on sound advice by counsel to them and through me to them.
And so the board determines how much each contract, scope of work, all
Yes,
that.
yes. And I think then in collaboration with you, so I think some of the discussion here was about some of the money. What I've said to HTA is that they need to look at the resources they have now. Maybe some things don't need to be used and we can put that aside. It shouldn't just be building on this, it needs to be relooked at. And so I think that's what they can go through that exercise so they could request the right amount of money going forward into the next biennium, because you have your biennium budget coming up. So it's like perfect timing. And so I think now is that time for the next administration, the next legislature to work with this entity and move forward that way and to address the needs.
Okay, so when is the next board meeting,
I don't know.
George?
Coming up. A week before the Thanksgiving.
Okay, so that process would be what? They would have to either decide on it, discuss it, hopefully at that meeting. If not, they have to wait till January or a subsequent
Yeah,
meeting.
so or they could have a special meeting, you know, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
scheduled for a meeting, but we also have a special.
And so then, you know, in my advice, but they have to decide that is because they are a separate agency. I'm here as a to help support them. Is that what do they want to do and how do they delegate what things to the staff? And so maybe, you know, with all the things that happen from the pandemic, which I think everyone was under stress with, and you know, HVCB and everybody, we went through so many different things and staff changes from executive to, you know, directors and everything. You know, all those things should be clarified, like what is the delegated authority, you know, who does what, and work that up into a plan so that it doesn't have to get resolved here, but then they do it as a board, so it's their own internal governance and practice that should apply. Because I agree that under the law, the authority is the board, and the authority has the ability to delegate to the staff what it does. And maybe that needs to be reviewed in the process too and made clear.
Yeah. Well, we sent you the email on Monday for today's hearing. So
yeah,
you didn't want to try to call us maybe after the meeting? On Tuesday?
I was looking at all kind of facts, and trying to evaluate everything. And I didn't want to preliminary say, oh, what are we going to do or not do? And so I came to this decision this weekend, and last night I was writing it up. And then this morning I informed CNHA and HVCB and HTA in my office before this hearing.
Okay, Senator Inouye.
Mike,
So
thank you.
I apologize for the confusion. I'm just trying to help everyone get through this so we can improve it. Yeah.
At the outset, your comments,
Yeah.
you started off saying in the past or historically,
Yes.
the board and you makes the decisions. Then you said you changed the policy.
Yes.
So you actually deleted board's action from the beginning because you already said that you had to talk to staff, work together, create something, and came up with this where we are today. But so what's confusing is the board should have been no different than history. We've never had this issue before with board actions with DBED. So that's the concern I have.
Yeah.
Because you changed the management structure of HDA. The board has the responsibility, and that's why we go through a confirmation process.
And Senator, I didn't change the management structure, but
But
mean,
you separated the board. It seems like
no,
they did this, they were part of that.
Yeah.
They didn't have responsibility, whatever, but that's all I have to say.
yeah, thank you. And
Senator Gabe.
and then where I got involved, so say the, on the delegation side. What I asked Kalani to do, just to help them is, who do you guys want on the evaluation committee? I was giving them advice that you need 3 state employees. Here's some names. I wanted to make sure it fit. And so I said, let me, you guys go make the request and I'll approve it. And so they went to extensive efforts to find individuals that would be fair and not have any conflicts, you know, because there's a lot of different conflicts within the industry. And then to help them make the evaluation, right, and to score. So, you know, that's the kind of involvement that was in there. And so, but I take responsibility because I signed off, but it was with their consultation and their recommendations. And I do that with other staff that in my you know, other divisions, they submit the names to me and they ask me, are these names okay? And I say, okay. And they usually provide comment on that so that I can ensure that it's going to be fair, right? So
Okay,
I
so-
got more involved in the, my role was to resolve the protests.
So is it clear now that HTA will be handling the procurement?
Yep. I mean, handling the procurement is,
I mean, without
Yep.
having to go through you or through DBID? I mean, like
But-
all the way the other agencies handle?
but then the protest.
So isn't protest also handled by the entity until such time that
Yeah,
it goes to?
well,
you and
it was
AG?
all of me for the next 4 or 5 days, but then whoever is the next director can make that call as well, right?
Okay.
To what degree do they want to,
But for all other agencies, do
Yeah.
they handle the protests with the recommendation then to the SP, to the HP or whatever you call it?
yeah, we haven't had too many protests, so, you know, this is one of the exceptions, and that's why I got involved, but yes, normally so, but then I would get involved if there was a protest to be.
Understand, but I want to make it clear so that everybody knows going forward what the responsibility is, and it shouldn't
Yep.
be, I believe that that's what, and based on what?
Yeah.
You know, it should be, they should understand that, and
So
they
I
should
think we should
understand
Put
that.
that in the procurement documents as we put out the bid, yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, not necessarily. That should be standard operating procedures, and it shouldn't deviate
Yeah.
depending on who the DBID director
Yeah, so
is.
Senator, this was helping in the transition and transition management.
I understand. I say, but it still cannot
Yeah.
change. So what is the reasoning that you would have the same people that was on the first RFP evaluating as well as the second RFP?
We want. So,
Yeah, but how do you, continuity is one thing when you're running something, but when you're evaluating
Yeah.
proposals and it's a
Yeah.
brand new, supposedly a
so-
brand new
yeah, so we did.
solicitation.
so some
Suppose-
people withdrew and some people, and we were looking at making sure we could.
I understand that, Mike, that we drew. I'm talking about what is the thinking and the reasoning why the agency, because I don't want that repeated again. I don't want this whole process repeated again. That if you're going to withdraw a proposal and come out with a new proposal, then you cannot taint it by having the same people who
Oh,
judge the first one,
yeah.
judge the second one,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because there's no,
Yeah, it needs to be a new group of, these are two
Exactly.
separate, yes,
so I
absolutely.
think that needs to be made clear. And to me,
Yes.
it's common sense.
Yes, that's common sense.
You know, so why wouldn't you have kept the same thing? And those are the kinds of questions that the agency has to answer as they're going forward. It doesn't make sense that we're going to do that. Now, what about the fact that you folks gave the proposals from each of the bidders to the other guy? Is that standard?
That was what happened in the beginning, and so when I stepped in, that was already done, but that was during.
Okay,
during
who
the-
did it? Who
Um,
gave it?
I'm not sure, but it might have been whoever the procurement of in the first time. You're talking about the first RFP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that standard? Bonnie, is that
Yeah,
standard
you
that they
should
give,
ask them, yeah.
that they
I
give?
defer to you. Because I think that. You know,
Documents are public knowledge, however, the agencies can choose to withhold, redact certain documents, the frustration of government operations.
Okay, so the proposals themselves are
Bonnie,
public.
be better.
I just don't want this repeated
yeah.
again.
Yeah, Bonnie, let's just come up with a good practice. Because I defer to her.
Well, I'm asking her the question. So Bonnie, is it standard operating procedures in the debriefing that the other entity, the losing entity or the winning entity gets the other people's proposals?
In the debriefing, no. In the debriefing, it should only be what your scores are and how the evaluation committee came to your scores.
Okay, but in this case, what I heard that they were given the proposals.
Again, so the rules say that upon award, documents are public knowledge, but again, the agency can withhold them and redact them based on confidentiality, proprietary, and frustration of government operations, knowing that there could be, or there is a either protest or another RFP that maybe go out that would could influence it.
Okay, so the fact that they were given the first proposal, the protest and debriefing were given the other bidders, what is a violation?
It's not a violation if the award was already posted. It may just been a little bit premature to do so. As I said, the purpose of the debriefing is to let the vendors know where they fell short.
I understand.
Against the evaluation criteria.
But to get the proposal of the other
Then
entity,
you're protesting.
yeah.
That's a little unusual to do.
So is that a violation?
It's not a violation.
So how do we protect that from not happening again? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there has to be some kind of violation or something, otherwise, why wouldn't they do it again?
I think they're learning from their mistake
No,
that you would not.
There should be some, if it's in a rule, then it's a violation if it was done contrary to the rule, right?
Correct.
So then we've done contrary to the rule, so it's a violation.
Well, again, as I said, they already made the award, so documents are public upon award. What would have been smarter to do perhaps is when they did the debriefing, show them what their scores are and maybe how they ranked against, well, there's only two of them, so how they ranked. And then if they still wanted the documents, they could have gotten the documents. I don't know if I would given it to them at the same time.
Okay, in the case that there is a reissuance, a recall or, reissuance of the RFP. To me, and I don't know, maybe we have to amend our laws, but to me, you give everybody the proposals. Now you get a very similar proposal. RFP comes out, not exactly the same, but same in many aspects. They know what each other already did. Is that fair?
I don't know if it's fair, but it's not prohibited. But once the proposal is canceled, then there's nothing to give.
But it was canceled, but it was already given.
The first one or the second?
The first one.
The first one, but it wasn't canceled till after the debriefing took place and the protest was issued.
Right, and therein lies the problem, that the agency can decide to withdraw any RFP, and I've raised this in issuance, for any willy-nilly decision. They don't like who it was awarded to. Now they give the proposals. Now they know. Now they go out and reissue it so that their friend gets it. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but therein lies the problems with that kind of stuff happening. And then you put the same people on this selection. I mean, it's fraught with problems.
Well, there's a couple of different issues. So the evaluation committee issue is separate, but it is. The agency can determine that to cancel a solicitation if it's in the best interest of the state. And that's what DBED DBED did.
So, I mean, that's always gonna be the case. You're not gonna say it's not in the best interest of the state, for whatever reason you pick, right? I mean, come on, it's a broad statement,
Okay,
so.
so are we talking about now the proposals
We're going
being,
forward, yeah.
being public knowledge? Once he canceled the solicitation, then then those documents are no longer public because there's not a contract to,
Right, but it
to
was
issue
already
against.
made public.
yes, it was.
See, so there's something wrong with the rules to say that, you know, until all protests are resolved, none of them becomes public or something. I don't know what. the
We
issue-
may have made the mistake in that one, right? I
But
think we
then-
made the mistake in that one.
But then the director just mentioned they're gonna go out again. And so now all the contractors are gonna get to see the first RFP proposals, the second RFP proposals, and then now they're gonna do it third time.
Well, I don't think anybody had the anticipation that would be three times
yeah.
issuing
Yeah.
a solicitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the law needs to cover some of them. So now you can have a third party coming in, take what HVCB did, take what CHN did, and then come up with something of their own,
Yeah,
and
you're
then
right.
win the process, win the.
That,
bid.
that concern was expressed to me vigorously by both of them. And yes, I agree with
That's
you.
not fair to
Yeah,
the
we shouldn't have
parties.
done that.
They put a lot of money and time into doing a bid. And I bothers me when agencies can just withdraw bids, and they do that all the time in construction. They get
And
a
that's why you
protest and then
passed
they
a law
withdraw.
last year that requires agencies to post their cancellations and a justification why they're canceling their solicitation. So that you did, that went into effect this past July.
So now let me,
Okay, so that might, you know, we're getting into the UIP issue here about public documents. So that I think we need to converse with.
so now Bonnie,
UIP.
does the current contract HVCB had will continue on until such time the new bid goes? Or
Their extension only goes through March of this year. So they, DBED HDA would have to come in with another request for contract extension or possibly procurement exemption to allow them to continue on because they have no options to extend. Period. Up to March, there is no contract unless something
March
goes.
31st.
So if no extension is given on March 31st, then HTA will cease to have any contract.
That's correct.
But there's nothing that prevents them from renewing. They can keep renewing every 6 months, no matter what.
They can keep coming in with a SPO Form 3, which is a request for contract extension. Provide justification why they need to extend.
Which is because they have a new RFP. That would be a reason.
The option is to have no contract in place at all.
Have you ever denied?
We have, or we've shortened the contract period because we will ask them, what have you, where are you in the procurement process? What have you done since the last time? Why are you coming in 2 days before the contract is due to expire? Yes, we have denied them. We have shortened the period. So we'll say, instead of giving you 6 months, you're only going to get 90 days. Just to give you, or they tell us that they're almost at the award period. They just need to.
Yeah, because if
finish
this is the third
contracts.
time we're doing the RFP, I mean, we could keep doing this game for quite some time. And
Oh,
Yeah.
that'd be a whole
No.
new issue.
Not very,
For the HVC, current contract, how long did the contract, or how long they been in existence with HTA?
the HTA, I mean, you're talking about HVCV.
Yeah, how long they been,
Senator, there's a long history with them. So when HTA first started in 1998, they were the sole contractor for the whole market. And then when I became chair and Senator Kim was the chair of the committee, we broke up those contracts into multiple contracts. And so their scope and capacity was reduced. And so throughout the years, so for sure 1998 when HTA started, but before that, they were receiving contracts that went through DBED and the legislature would appropriate like money and then it would go just to HVCB. That's one of the reasons why HTA was created so that it wouldn't just be happening.
so how did the process?
Yeah, so
HVCB has had the contract or just?
5
the
years.
US marketing.
Yeah, so
Right.
US marketing, since
So, how do we come to this that we are putting this out now,
because of
to bid?
the law says that contracts are only 5 years. So you must put it out to bid. And so every 5 years, and if the contract is going to be extended, it has to get approval by the SPO for emergency purposes, not regular and normal purposes. They've asked us many hard questions about why you're doing this and made us provide them a lot of information and documentation from pricing to everything. So
Thank you.
that's what the other process we went through, Senator.
Yes, because the reason why I just don't understand, so the first one went out, then the protest came in. Protest was denied or whatever, and procurement person said, he's not gonna honor the protest, and then was overruled, not sure in the process of that. Then the second one went out. Everybody seen the cards, aces, whatever. And the second one went out, and then
HCNA.
yeah, HCNA got the contract. And then there was another protest. See, what I'm getting at here is why am I uncomfortable? And I know I talked to you at length on how uncomfortable I am. Because again, this is another thing, and this is not taking any swipe out of anybody.
Yes.
But my observation, now not me as being a senator, my observation is, soon as they got the contract, everybody and their cousin was upset. Seriously, that they got the contract. Talking about how inexperienced it was, all that. So when HDCB came into play, so before all these contracts, who on check and balance them? Who on check and balance them? Nobody. They gave them one chance. Thing is, you prove this now and not give them a chance to prove. And we all know that they can't do, and now, you know who's gonna suffer? Not only the taxpayers. The Hawaiians bite the dust again, Mike. And we talk about this over and over. When are we gonna be on the same playing field as everybody else? We're not, because you're gonna put this bid, they're not gonna get them, and probably the other guy's not gonna get them. Somebody else gonna undercut us. It should not be separated. I don't agree with separating them. But that's a cop out, and there's a cop out. We should stay with what we have and go through them. Punch the con, go through them. Let them prove they cannot. And if they cannot do it, we replace them. But give them one chance, because everybody else had one chance. Mike, me and you had one chance, right? Remember that day? We both had chances. Why we cannot give these guys chances? That's what I'm talking about. We're talking about because nobody wants the Hawaiians. I will tell you this right now. We have all of that money. And that's not true. I'm gonna tell you that's not true right now. Because they're gonna have the money, they're gonna be in control and marketing us. Who is the best people to market us? It's Hawaiians. Why do we keep going to everybody else, Mike?
Here,
No.
your
Thank you,
question,
Chair.
no other questions?
This is just bothering me. I'm sitting here, listening on how we gonna correct them now. How we gonna correct them now? Shouldn't have this correction. The procurement, one person said the procurement person didn't want, the SPO wasn't involved, AG wasn't involved. That came from the HDA workers.
No, but
They don't understand.
I think we all share your frustration, which is why we're having the hearing, because we want to make sure that things are going to be transparent and.
Okay, I need to say something though, and I understand where you're coming from, Senator, but this isn't about Hawaiians versus not Hawaiians. This is about the procurement and whether or not we follow the laws of the procurement. And I just hope that it's not characterized. And then when thinking about giving a person a chance, it isn't about following the procurement law, chance or no chance, right? I mean.
And so Senator, what I believe is what I'm recommending is the most sustainable option to avoid further challenging on who wins, right? Because this process is going to keep, if we stay with the existing one, it could not be resolved for over a year or more, even after this, because it would go to DCCA and then to the court.
Right.
So that's what we try to resolve.
Right,
Yeah.
but Mike, we're doing it because they were a mess up in the beginning.
Yep.
People screwed up and made this whole process look bad because they didn't follow the law.
And I could have done a better job of coaching them and helping them through that. And
Right,
that's what,
and then instead you made it worse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
have to say that.
But before you cancel the award and the RFP, why not go to the board and ask them, do you want to stick out with this process? or should we cancel? Because then right now it's unilaterally being decided. Right, it's not like it's HTA's. I mean, you're gonna unilaterally decide, you're gonna cancel it, then the board will have no choice but to say, okay, we're gonna have to issue another RFP because we need a marketing contract.
Let me take that under advisement. Okay,
Because then
yeah.
that's where I'm kind of unclear
Okay.
as to what the HOPA does and
Sure.
then.
okay. Let me take that under advisement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
If
part
you
of
can
the problem is we
clarify the
changed
role.
Procurement process and took away the exemptions, and that's part of the problem. You're probably.
No, transparency is what we need.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
So,
but
so Mike, I think what we're asking for is a real clear delineation. What is, what is the CPO in the HTA?
sure.
And a real clear roles and responsibilities, because if you said everything is delegated, they didn't know everything was delegated.
No,
So,
yeah.
if
It's
it's
a learning
only the
process.
training
Yeah.
of a person.
That's where,
You know.
because if it's gonna be like that, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, that the DBED director is gonna make all these decisions, then we don't necessarily need HTA then. And then DBED can do all the contracting.
Yeah.
Which is how it used to be, and if you wanna break it up into 5 contracts at DBED, that's fine too. But then that's where does it begin and end
Yeah.
between DBED and
Yeah.
HTA? And if the decisions are gonna be at DBED, then let's just keep it there and then repeal HTA.
So when I decide on this, I'll write up something to make sure that it's clear. And then I think just have to keep aware that, after December 5th, the next director under the law has that authority. So you guys might want to look at, inserting some special provision in 103D relating to marketing contracts. Because when I initially wrote the HTA law, I exempted them from procurement because I knew this would be kind of challenging in Mexico's marketing and you have to move fast. And that's why it was supposed to be resolved at the board. So, but I get it that we should have a process that's little better than just saying have an exemption. And so that could be a recommended policy change.
Whatever you do, it should be
Yep.
taken to the board.
Yep.
They're having a meeting. However you delegate
Yep.
or don't, that should be clear and what the process is, because it really is a board decision.
Because the intention of HTA was to have that autonomy. Yes.
So make it clear
Okay.
to the board and the board should decide yay or nay.
I agree.
That way, even with the transition going forward,
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's
But with
clear.
the methods of procurement, I see no need for an exemption. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
different ways that with the
Yeah.
procurement law, it's flexible enough.
Yeah, so what I think, Senator, we're doing is learning how to get trained and get the expertise and carry it out. So I think, and given, all the things that have gone on from the pandemic and all that, there's just transition management. And we got, I think I'm confident that they're going to do a good job going forward.
Okay, so the
With
next board meeting again is when? Okay, because I'd be interested to see what the agenda is, to see what decisions you're gonna make versus.
Yeah, because my decision on canceling the procurement is, so what you're saying, what you're recommending to me is let the board decide that, not the HOPA.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll take that.
if they're
under
gonna
advisement.
cancel and then if they're gonna,
Delegated.
Okay,
You delegated authority to them, so that should be the decision.
and if they cannot make the decision, then then we don't need HTA. You should just go back to DBED.
okay, I hear what you're saying, so let me take that under advisement, and I'm glad I didn't sign the papers before the hearing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you. Adjourn.